Welcome, fellow traveller, to the Sleepless Voyager, where history becomes a gentle sea. Tonight we set sail into the Viking crossing to Iceland and Greenland. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to leave the green fjords of Norway behind, to step onto a wooden ship that rocks like a cradle on the dark Atlantic, and to trust only the stars and a crystal shard of light to guide you? If these quiet wanderings bring you comfort, you're welcome to like or subscribe, only if it feels right. And if you wish, leave a note of where and when you're listening. Each one is a lantern glowing across our drifting crew. Now, settle in, breathe slowly, and step aboard. If you drift into dreams, the ship will carry on for you. The night around us is wide, and the sea is already waiting. Picture a wooden ship at anchor, its hull darkened by tar and salt, its sail furled like a sleeping wing. On the deck, a single lantern swings gently in the wind, casting a honeyed glow on damp planks. The light glimmers in drops of sea spray clinging to the ropes, and you might imagine that you're standing there, the cold wood beneath your feet, the smell of pitch and pine mingling with the sharper taste of salt. This is no warship, no vessel bristling with shields, but a nar, a broad-bellied cargo ship. It was never built for speed, but for carrying people, animals and tools. To touch the side of such a ship is to feel the grain of oak, swollen from long hours in the water, held together by iron nails and human hope. Tonight, that ship waits like a cradle on the tide, ready to rock its passengers toward horizons unknown. A soft breath of wind moves through the fjord. Above, stars hang bright and steady, their reflections scattered in the black mirror of the sea. One of the crew leans against the rail, gazing upward, lips moving in a quiet murmur. Whether it is prayer or simply counting constellations, you cannot tell. Another sailor checks the ropes, his fingers stiff in the chill, while from below comes the muffled bleat of a goat unsettled by the strange sounds of the harbour at night. It is here, in this moment between departure and the deep sea, that you join the voyage. You're not asked to row, nor to haul, nor to stand watch, only to breathe in the night and let the journey carry you. Have you ever noticed how different wood smells when it is wet? The ship carries that scent everywhere. Pine resin, dark tar, seaweed drying along the hull. The sails, even when folded, give off a musky odour of wool soaked in lanolin, oiled to withstand the storms to come. To rest your hand on the mast is to feel the quiet heartbeat of the voyage before it even begins. Voices drift across the deck. Leif the steersman, tall and spare, bends over the tiller, muttering something about the wind. Bjorn the jokester, his laugh already booming, insists the sea looks calm enough to drink from. Sigrid the weaver, shawl drawn tight around her, leans on a coil of rope and hums a tune half lullaby, half prayer. Somewhere in the shadows, Einar the Scold scratches lines on a strip of wood, practicing a verse he will recite later to ease the long hours, and Thora, the mother, rocks her child in her arms, swaying gently with the rhythm of the hull, her lullaby carrying further than she knows, as if it were meant for the sea itself. The fjord around them is hushed, but it is not silence. It is the layered quiet of night, the slap of water against the stones, the whisper of reeds along the bank, the sigh of the tide breathing in and out. To step into that quiet is to feel time stretching differently, as if the hours before dawn belong to no one but those who dare to travel them. Above, the moon tilts a silver edge across the mountains, and you might imagine it as a lantern hung in the heavens, guiding the ship as surely as the one swinging on the deck. For the Vikings, light was not only comfort but compass. Some carried crystals called sunstones, clear, shimmering pieces of calcite that, when held to the sky, could catch the hidden position of the sun even through clouds. Tonight, though, the stars themselves are enough, scattered like runes across the black. Think of the courage it took to look at those stars and trust them. No map, no compass, only memory, story, and sky. And yet, again and again they set sail, not to fight, not only to raid, but to search for land where families could grow, where sheep could graze, where children could inherit more than stones. You might imagine yourself lifting the lantern, holding it close to the rail, watching the glow fall across the dark water. For a moment the sea looks alive with sparks, tiny pinpricks of green light where plankton drift and glow in the waves. Each swell seems to breathe with its own secret fire, a reminder that even in darkness, the ocean carries its own stars. A hush falls across the deck as the steersman calls out, "The sail, folded for now, will soon be raised." The ropes creak, the mast groans, and the lantern swings faster with the movement. A final look at the fjord, the homes with their hearth fires glowing faint on the shore, the scent of pinewood smoke curling up into the night. And then the anchor is lifted. The ship turns slowly, prow, toward the open sea. Behind, the land fades into shadow. Ahead, only water and stars. The voyage has begun, and here, as you settle back, as the creak of wood and the sigh of waves fill your ears, you may let yourself drift. If your eyes close now, the ship will still carry you forward. You do not need to steer, nor row, nor watch the stars. The sea will hold you, the night will guide you, the lantern will glow until your dreams take over the journey. Dawn comes slowly in the north, not as a blaze, but as a pale wash laid carefully across the sky, and the fjord receives it like a mirror tilted to catch a shy smile. You stand with the others on the damp deck while the water around the hull folds and unfolds in long, patient breaths. The lantern from last night still burns, though its light is fading into the new day, and beyond the ship the mountains rise like sleeping animals with snow along their backs. A gull wheels once, twice, then perches on a piling as if to watch you leave, cocking its head in that brisk, curious way birds use when they're measuring a situation. The ship wears its own dawn. Beads of condensed mist gathered along the ropes, a soft gleam on the tarred planks, and a question in the sail that will soon be raised. Families are everywhere. They move the way people do in the last minutes before a journey, both careful and distracted, weighing bundles with their hands, circling back for the thing they know they didn't pack but cannot name, tying one more knot, smoothing one more blanket. Thora, the mother, tucks a woolen hood around her child's ears. The little one blinks at the world with the forgiving seriousness of the very young. Sigrid the weaver checks the small chest that holds her shuttle and a treasured comb. She treats the tools the way a singer treats her voice, with quiet respect and a superstition that borders on love. Einar the Skald counts under his breath, not numbers but words, rehearsing a stanza he will pretend to improvise later. Leif the steersman walks the deck as if reading it, palms sliding along the rail, eyes tasting wind. And Bjorn the jokester, broad as a barn door and twice as cheerful, carries a bundle of hard bread as if it were a noble treasure, then nearly drops it with a theatrical groan, declaring loudly that it is heavier than a baby seal and just as stubborn. A goat answers with a reed-thin bleat from below, and laughter travels the length of the ship like a wave. There are more animals, a pair of sheep with faces like painted masks, chickens in a wicker cage clucking with the indignation only chickens can achieve, a calf that watches everything with a mild, sun-brown gaze. This is not a warrior's vessel. It is a floating village, a wooden meadow, a careful risk in the shape of oak and sail. The ship itself is a nar, though you don't need the word to understand its meaning. It is wide through the middle like a patient breath, and stitched together plank by plank in the old northern way, each board overlapping the next so the hull flexes rather than fights the sea. You can feel that give under your feet, the small elastic answering of wood that knows water is not an enemy, only a language to speak. Leif pauses by the mast and looks up, measuring the pale wind that slides between the mountains like a silver fish. "It will do," he says to no one in particular, which is how leaders talk when they want the world itself to feel included. He nods to the crew at the halyard, and the folded wool, thick as a winter cloak and smelling faintly of sheep and smoke, begins to climb. Ropes rasp against wood in a music that is older than any one of you. The sail trembles, fills, and becomes the ship's second skin. The fjord answers by setting a path at its centre, a darker seam in the water that opens toward the sea like a promise not yet made. On the shore, people have come to see you off. They stand in small knots where the heather thins, caps in hand, faces carrying the bright, careful look of farewells. Someone lifts a horn and blows a note that carries further than a voice would, a sound that is not quite grief and not quite celebration, but something that binds both together. A girl in a red shawl waves until the last possible moment, and then waves a little more for safety, as if excess can tilt luck in your favour. Einar lifts a palm and offers a line that says many things at once. We will return as stories whether or not we return as people. It earns him a dark look from Thora because poetry is welcome, but certain kinds of honesty should be saved for later. He bows his head and grins and amends. Happy stories, the kind that grow in winter and are eaten in spring. The anchor comes up dripping. The chain leaves a wet tattoo down the crewman's sleeve, and the smell of the deep rises with it, a mineral coolness that belongs to places where light seldom goes. As the hull eases forward, the shore slides like a curtain, not moving yet changing, and your senses try to memorize everything that won't follow. The angle of the boathouse roof against the sky, the furrow in the path where carts turned, the delicate lace of a lichen on a rock where children used to sit and drop pebbles into the water, counting the pauses before each tiny splash. Bjorn cups his hands to his mouth and shouts a promise to write, then remembers he can't write, then promises to send a fish instead. Someone on the shore shouts back that they have enough fish here, thank you, and would prefer a sonnet. Einar bows extravagantly and declares that he will pack a sonnet in the next barrel of salt. The Nar gathers the fjord under her like skirts, and the oars are shipped out in case the wind slackens between cliffs. The rhythm begins, the low, slow drum beat of men leaning their weight into the sea, and the answering hiss of blades lifting, dripping, settling, and digging again. It is a work song without words, and it makes the day larger around you. You taste the morning on your tongue, iodine and cold metal, wool grease and smoke, a ghost of yesterday's porridge, and the first idea of tomorrow's weather. Far off, a river empties itself with the sigh of one who's come a long way alone and is relieved to be among friends. Leaf passes you and taps the rail with 2 fingers, a superstition against accidents, and then taps the tiller with the same easy reverence. His eyes never really leave the margins of the world, those places where rock and air rub shoulders and sometimes trade secrets. Sigrid stands near the bow with a strip of woven ribbon between her hands, a bright red line to tie one chest to another. Her knuckles are pale, though her voice is steady as she hums. People are always brave in sound before they are brave in silence. Thora adjusts her footing, the way mothers do on moving ground, and rocks the child in time with the oars, turning a rolling deck into an improvised cradle. Einar has found a place by the mast and is scraping words into a small board with a bone point, not because he fears forgetting, but because remembering is his craft. Bjorn, for his part, sits on a coil of rope and tries to look philosophical, while stealthily chewing a corner of hard bread. The bread maintains its reputation by refusing to yield, until he finally raps it twice against the deck, as if interrogating a suspect. "Older than my boots," he announces straight-faced, "and twice as trustworthy." The crew applauds the bread for its integrity, as if it has just sworn an oath. The mouth of the fjord approaches with the unhurried certainty of a hinge opening a door. You can feel the change before you see it. The wind shifts tone, the waves begin to breathe longer, and the air grows saltier and a little wilder, as if it has slept outside all its life. High on one slope, a waterfall climbs down the rock in white handfuls, and for a moment the ship turns slightly so everyone can look, because even those who have lived inside a landscape still admire it when they are about to leave. The sun, now a pale coin higher in the sky, touches the spray and makes 1,000 brief rainbows that seem to appear for you alone, then dim modestly when your attention moves on. At the last headland, Leif lifts his hand and the oars pause, blades trailing for a heartbeat before sliding in again. A raven watches from a spruce, dropping its head and lifting it with theatrical interest, the way ravens seem to stage their curiosity. A smaller boy on shore imitates the bird with such accuracy that the raven answers, creating a moment of comic diplomacy between species. Einar promises to write the treaty. Bjorn offers to mediate for a fee of 5 dried fish. Sigrid says gently that the fee will come from the bread, which causes Bjorn to declare bankruptcy with an expression of tragic relief. And then you are out. The fjord gives way and the North Atlantic opens its palm under the bow, cool and immense and full of 1,000 breathings that all feel like one. The sail rounds its shoulders and leans, taking hold of the day. The ship answers with that small, brave tilt that means trust me, and you do, because even fear finds a place to sit inside motion. Behind you, the mountains begin to blur into a memory of blue. Ahead, the seam of sea and sky stitches itself tighter, pulling you forward stitch by stitch. You feel the deck rise and fall, not as a challenge, but as a slow, persuasive lullaby. Somewhere a bell sounds, someone's spoon tapping a pot, and the smell of warm milk and barley offers comfort in a language older than maps. You do not need to look back again. The leaving is done, and the journey is already, in its quiet way, arriving. If your eyes begin to lower now, if breath lines up with the oars and thoughts loosen like unknotted rope, know that the ship understands how to hold you. Let the wind read the sail, let the water lift the hull. Let the morning take your weight, and if you drift for a while, the fjord will still be there inside you, and the sea will carry you softly on. The open water has accepted you, and now the rhythm of the voyage begins to reveal itself. The ship rises and falls with a steady grace, as if the ocean were a giant breathing beneath you, inhaling and exhaling without hurry. The fjord is behind, the coastline is only a blue shadow, and before you spreads the long, quiet reach of the North Atlantic. It is a vastness both humbling and calming, an endless floor of water where every ripple is part of a larger song. On deck, the crew moves slowly into their tasks, settling into the patterns that will keep them safe. The ropes must be checked, the sail trimmed, the tiller held steady. You hear the sound of rope against wood, of water slipping along the hull, of leather shoes scraping softly as sailors shift weight. These noises are not distractions. They are the music of survival, a work song without instruments. And within that rhythm you can almost feel the heartbeat of the ship itself, as though the timbers remember the trees they once were and still whisper to one another across the grain. At the centre of it all, Leif the steersman leans against the great curved tiller. His hand is firm, but his eyes keep lifting toward the sky. The sun is hidden behind a thin lid of cloud, pale and uncertain, but he seems to read the light anyway. From a pouch at his belt he draws out something small, a crystal that gleams even in this faint day. It is a sunstone, Iceland spare, a shard of the earth so clear it catches what the eyes alone cannot see. Leif holds it up, turns it slowly, and a faint beam appears where none should be, a secret compass drawn from light itself. Sigrid, watching him, tilts her head. "How can a stone tell you where the sun hides?" she asks, not mocking but truly curious. Leif smiles with the slow patience of one who has answered before. The sky holds more light than the eye admits. This stone shows it. The sun never leaves. Even when it is shy, Bjorn cannot resist. He snatches a bit of dried fish from his pouch, bites down, and winces. "If the sun never leaves," he grumbles, "perhaps it is hiding in this fish, because it feels as old as creation." He pretends to wrestle with the strip as though it were a wild animal. The others laugh. Even the goats below seem to offer a bleat of agreement. The humour is necessary. Life at sea, stripped of laughter, can turn heavy. A loaf of bread too hard to eat becomes a jest, and the jest becomes a charm against despair. One sailor mutters that Bjorn's teeth will be the only tools sharper than the ship's nails, and Bjorn bows with mock dignity. The Skald Einar seizes the moment, carving a line into memory. A man can gnaw a stone if laughter softens it first. He promises to weave it into a verse by nightfall. While they jest, the ship continues its conversation with the water. The sail bulges like a chest full of breath, then slackens, then fills again. The ropes hum with the strain. Each knot, each line is both ancient and new, because every voyage remakes the knowledge of the last. Tar coats the seams, dark and sticky, the smell both acrid and strangely comforting. It is the scent of safety, of rain kept out, of waves refused. You might imagine walking slowly along the deck, fingers brushing the ropes, palms resting on the wood. The ship feels alive under you. Every creak is a message, every groan a reminder that it bends rather than breaks. To touch the mast is to feel centuries of learned craft. The way oak can be shaped to carry not just warriors but children, mothers, livestock, dreams. A gull follows for a time, then wheels away. In its place, silence thickens, broken only by the occasional splash of something unseen. Leif glances over the side, calm. "Whales," he murmurs, "too deep for us, but near enough to watch." The thought travels through the crew like a shiver, not of fear but of awe. To imagine creatures vast as hills gliding beneath, unseen yet felt. That is enough to remind every voyager that the sea is not empty but crowded with mysteries. Einar begins a verse aloud, his voice deep and slow. The sea is a book of secrets, its letters written in waves, its ink drawn from the hidden sun. He pauses, scratches his chin and adds, "and sometimes a fish too old for eating." Bjorn pretends to bow again, which earns more laughter. The day unfolds without haste. Clouds shift, a few breaks of light touch the water, and for a moment the surface shines like hammered silver. The crew breathe easier under that glow, as though reminded that the world is not all grey. The animals settle. The child in Thora's arms dozes, rocked as much by the sea as by her song. Even the goats, after their bleating protests, chew calmly on fodder. As you lean into the sound of water and wind, you can let yourself soften too. Notice how each detail works like a thread. The gleam of a crystal showing hidden sun. The scrape of rope against wood. The creak of a mast that will not break. The humour spun from bread and fish. All of it weaves together into something steady. The sea may be vast, but the tools of the voyage, stone, wood, rope, laughter, are enough. If your eyes begin to close here, that is no problem. The ship will not notice, and the sea will not mind. The tiller is steady in Leif's hands. The sunstone still points its secret way, and the laughter of Bjorn lingers like an amulet against worry. You may drift as the ship drifts, carried by water, guided by light you cannot always see but can always trust. Morning stretches further across the sky, and the ship moves at a patient walking pace along the outer swell, neither rushed by wind nor slowed by doubt. Yet before the sea becomes the only church and the sky the only roof, the crew decides to fold a little ceremony into the day, a braid of habit and hope that binds the living to the journey. Rituals are not only for priests in sacred halls, they are the way hands learn to speak when the heart wants steadiness, the way breath finds shape when words might wobble. Here, on this deck of oak and intention, the old ways arrive not with thunder but with simple objects and remembered gestures. A bird in a wicker basket, a carved hammer of Thor tied to a thong, a bowl with a small piece of bread and a splash of milk, a quiet circle of people who know that luck is a kind of work. Leif the steersman calls for a brief lay-to, and the sail eases. The ship's forward hunger softens into a drift. The sea takes no offence, it merely changes tempo, running its hands along the hull and humming in the planks. Sigrid the Weaver brings out a little cloth she has woven, not grand, just a palm-sized square with a red braid through the border. She places it carefully near the mast step, the way a person might set a lantern on a windowsill, part decoration, part signal, part love for the place that shelters you. Thora settles the drowsing child more firmly into her sling and joins the circle, fingers smoothing the little one's cap with an absent tenderness that is, itself, a prayer. Einar the Skald stands a half step back, as if to witness the words as they form. He has learned that poems grow bigger when given a respectful distance. Bjorn the jokester lowers his voice out of instinct, which he will later deny, and holds the wicker basket with mock gravity, as though it were a chest of silver rather than a portable piece of sky. Inside the basket waits a raven, glossy black as wet ink and just as ready to write a message in the air. Its eyes are not human eyes, but they hold an intelligence that has watched ships come and go long enough to judge whether these people understand the weather of their own hearts. In earlier crossings, so the older men say, a raven is loosed when the sky's unclear or the mind is even more so. If the bird climbs and circles back, land is not near, and patience is the right kind of courage. If the bird cuts away in a single bold line, then hope may point in that direction too, a black arrow flung from the bow of the world. Leif glances to the horizon and then to the faces gathered, and he invites the argument that everyone expected, because no ceremony is complete without a small quarrel to wake the gods. A raven will tell us nothing the wind does not already. Say, he remarks, not unkindly. We steer by sky and wave, we trust our hands. A fisherman with a salt-grey beard, who has seen more summers than the rest and wears them like shells on a string, lifts his chin. And why not let the bird read the same book, he counters. 2 eyes are good, 4 are better. Sigrid smiles, a small curve of mouth that could calm a stirred pond. Let the raven go and keep our prayers, she suggests. One lifts the body, the other the spirit, and both ride the same breeze. Bjorn, stroking the basket lid with theatrical thoughtfulness, declares that the raven has already promised him it will find the nearest bakery, whereupon Einar murmurs that ravens prefer wisdom to wheat, and Bjorn retorts that the wisest thing in this world is a fresh loaf with butter. Laughter moves through the circle like a warm current, dissolving any sharpness among the opinions. Leif nods then, as if he had been waiting for the crew to agree with themselves. He produces from within his cloak a small hammer of wood, carved with the shape that calls Thor to mind without needing to say the name aloud. The token is not magic in the way stories make magic, with sparks and transformation. It is magic in the quiet way a key is magic to a locked door, or a hand to a shoulder at the right moment. He hangs it from a peg at the mast and sets his palm against the timber, not banging, not pleading, just a steady touch, like a promise given between friends. The sounds of the sea arrange themselves to make room. The ropes cease their complaining and turn to listening. The sail ruffles once and then holds its breath. Even the goats below stop gnawing, as if reminded that the grass of the world is only eaten at the permission of the larger patterns. Thora closes her eyes. Sigrid, without quite meaning to, begins to hum a tone that the others recognise because their bones recognise it. A note that falls like a ribbon through the centre of a room and ties strangers into kin. Einar speaks softly, not a grand stanza, just a thread of plain speech that poetry will visit later. May we borrow strength without stealing it. May we cross without breaking what we cross. May we return as good ancestors to the places that will remember us. Leif tips the bowl, letting a little milk touch the deck, an offering not to a jealous sky but to the work itself, the way people pour the first sip for the earth that grew the grain. He breaks the bread and sets a piece aside. Later, when the stomach asks for superstition, they will claim the gods preferred the smell. Bjorn lifts the basket and waits for a sign that may be nothing more than an inward nod, and then he opens the lid with care. The raven transfers to the rim with the ease of a creature born knowing how to balance on edges. It looks around at the assembled faces, blinks once with the inscrutable amusement of its kind, and opens its wings. Feathers unfold like a thought finishing itself. The bird blows up into the air as if the ship itself exhaled it. It rises, skims forward along the line of the bow, pauses in a black comma that says wait, and then writes a sentence none of you had the audacity to expect. It flies not left nor right nor back, but onward, a little to the west where the sky shows a paler seam of cloud. For a long breath no one speaks. Then Sigrid's hum becomes a higher note that curls in the air like the start of a smile. Leif does not call it an omen. He calls it helpful, which is the same thing said with a sailor's caution. The circle loosens. The ship's muscles wake again, sail trimmed, lines snugged, oars ready if the breeze forgets itself. Einar, bright with the satisfaction of a scene that will tell well, mutters that the raven has agreed to the itinerary, and Bjorn swears he saw it wink at him in particular, because scholars and birds both respect a man who travels with snacks. The child in Thora's sling sighs the deep sigh of a sleeper who trusts the bed, and Thora, eyes still half-lidded from the prayer, rocks with the ship the way grass rocks with wind. Leif returns to the tiller, touches the hammer token once more, and gives the order to fill the sail. As the ship gathers the day into its canvas, the wind lifts the edges with careful fingers. The soundscape resumes at a lower register. The rope's thrumming note, the hush of water stroking the hull, the scattered cluck of chickens reimagining their grievances, the distant blow of something large and kind beneath the surface. Above, a faint brightness, no more than a suggestion, finds you through the cloud, and if you hold your breath a little, you can taste that brightness on your tongue like the memory of a word you almost remember. You might imagine the raven still up there, just at the seam where sky becomes sky again, watching your path with the professional courtesy of one navigator to another. You might imagine the token at the mast warming under Leif's touch, not because wood can make heat from nothing, but because belief can. You might imagine that the prayer's last note is still moving across the water, too low to hear but not too low to steady a hand at the right moment. And if, in imagining, your own breath lengthens and your shoulders ease, then the ceremony has done double duty, guiding ship, guiding heart. Let your eyes soften with the horizon. Let the little quarrel over symbols dissolve into the larger agreement of wind and sail. The raven has written a line in the book of the morning. The rest of the chapter will write itself as the keel moves. If drowsiness comes now, it comes honestly, like shade under a tree. You may rest against the rail of your thoughts and let them drift, because the ship knows what to do, and every small hope you set upon the deck has taken root in the grain. The coastline fades like a dream upon waking, edges softening until rock becomes mist, and mist becomes nothing but memory. You stand at the railing, and it feels as though the world has tilted, removing the safety of land and replacing it with an endless breathing plane of water. The ship rises and falls gently, each movement a long exhale, each dip an inhale, as though the sea itself is cradling the hull in arms vast enough to hold mountains. Behind you, the fjords dissolve into the grey horizon, leaving only a faint smudge that could as easily be cloud as earth. Ahead, the ocean unfurls in all directions, horizons circling you like a ring. For many of the crew, this moment is the true beginning of the voyage. Until now, there was always the comfort of looking back, of seeing a roof line, a fire on a hillside, a trail of smoke curling skyward. Now there is nothing but water and sky, each mirroring the other in shades of slate and pearl. A silence spreads, though it is not complete. It is layered. The slow creak of timber, the mutter of ropes shifting in their knots, the occasional splash as an oar dips into foam. Over all of it lies the kind of hush that makes the heart beat more loudly, the ears more aware, the breath more deliberate. Thora the mother pulls her cloak tighter, rocking her child as if the sea itself were a lullaby. The baby stirs once, whimpers softly, then sighs back into sleep. Her song, hummed low, becomes part of the ship's soundscape, an invisible thread weaving through the planks and sails, softening the sharp edges of fear. Einar the Scald listens with tilted head, storing the melody as if it might bloom later into a verse. He murmurs lines under his breath, the words not yet formed but already moving toward poetry. Sigrid the Weaver stands beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She's not afraid, not exactly, but she is alert, her knuckles pale around the railing. "It feels as though the world has dropped away," she says quietly, "as though we are walking on a path made only of breath." Bjorn, never one to let solemnity sit too long, grins and spreads his arms wide. "Then let us walk it boldly. If the path is made of breath, I'll stride so loud the gods themselves will cough." A ripple of laughter travels along the deck, loosening shoulders, reminding everyone that humour is a kind of ballast, keeping the ship steady even when the sea cannot. Leif, ever at the tiller, does not smile but allows the joke its place. His eyes scan the water, the sky, the faint line where they meet. He has done this before, but even for him, there is always that moment when the absence of land makes the heart acknowledge its own smallness. "The sea is no emptiness," he finally says, voice low. "It only hides its stories below." The crew settles into their tasks with quiet determination. Buckets are lowered for seawater to wash the deck. Animals are checked. Goats nudge at their fodder. Chickens fuss with their feathers. The calf chews patiently, its eyes reflecting the shifting light. Every sound matters now. The creak of leather straps, the faint rasp of wool against wool, the whispered complaints of the animals. These small domestic noises remind everyone that life continues, even when the horizon seems intent on swallowing it. A gull appears, wheeling once before gliding away, its wings a fleeting reassurance that not all of the world has disappeared. Einar lifts a finger as though to underline the sight. "The sagas say gulls follow ships because they envy our land hunger," he notes. Bjorn shakes his head. "Or perhaps they only envy our bread, though it is harder than stone." He raps a crust against the railing. The sound is closer to a carpenter's knock than a baker's gift. Humour again loosens the moment, and with it comes a kind of acceptance. The crew lean into the rhythm of the day. Some mend ropes, others polish small tools, while Sigrid weaves quietly, her hands moving by habit, the shuttle passing like a heartbeat. The fabric grows inch by inch, and with each pass she hums a note that answers Thora's lullaby, weaving sound as surely as she weaves wool. The sky thickens, cloud upon cloud, until the horizon becomes a grey wall. Yet the sea itself remains calm, only lifting and lowering as if to remind you that stillness can exist even in the absence of certainty. Leif checks the tiller, steady as ever, and touches the sunstone once, though the light is faint. He does not need its gleam today, but the ritual comforts him. To hold something clear and solid in hand when all around is shifting water is to believe in guidance, even when unseen. You imagine leaning against the railing yourself, letting the mist touch your face. The air is sharp, almost metallic, filled with salt. Each breath feels like a draught of something ancient, as though the sea carries the breath of every creature who has crossed it before. In this shared inhalation, you become one more traveller, one more note in the ocean's song. The day stretches on. Shadows deepen as clouds move, and then a faint seam of brightness opens above, letting through a narrow band of pale gold. For a moment the water glows as if lit from within, and every face turns toward it. The silence deepens in reverence. It is not a miracle, not a message, simply the sun insisting it still exists, hidden but not absent. and in that recognition, fear eases. The world is not gone, it is only veiled. By evening, the crew begin to prepare for night. A pot is set to warm over a small firebox, and the smell of barley mingles with smoke and sea. Thora feeds the child a spoonful of softened mash, brushing the baby's cheek with a smile. Bjorn exaggerates a grimace as though jealous of the portion, and laughter rises again. Einar finally recites a verse, low and thoughtful. Though land is gone, though sky is dim, still hands may hold, still voices sing. The words settle like a cloak around the group, giving shape to the formless space. As the first stars attempt to prick through the grey, you allow your eyes to soften with them. The sea is no longer frightening, only vast, only steady. The ship moves as it should. The crew hum and laugh and murmur as they should, and you too may allow yourself to drift as you should. If your breath slows, if your thoughts scatter like gulls, know that the ship will carry you still. Out of sight of shore is not out of sight of care. You're held as the hull is held, as the child is held, as every voyager is held by the wide and patient sea. The rhythm of the voyage soon turns from excitement to routine, and nothing speaks of routine more clearly than the business of food. On land, meals are often occasions for variety, for surprise, for colour and spice. At sea, meals are different. They are anchors, the reliable stones in the river of passing hours. The ship's motion dictates when pots can be set, the weather decides what can be warmed, and the sea itself imposes its quiet austerity on every mouthful. Morning drifts into the deck with a grey light, and already the smell of dried fish rises from a barrel near the mast. The barrel's lid creaks open with reluctance, and inside lie the curled, stiff bodies of cod that have been salted and hung until they resemble planks rather than creatures. One of the sailors pulls at a piece, testing it with his knife, and the blade complains more loudly than the fish does. The sound draws Bjorn, who leans on the rail, pretending to faint at the sight. "I would rather gnaw the mast," he declares, "for at least oak has dignity." His joke earns the first ripple of laughter in the morning chill, and someone answers that oak would probably crack less easily than Bjorn's teeth. Beside them, Sigrid has set out a small cloth on which she arranges something softer, hard bread softened slightly in whey. She handles the pieces with care, as though arranging jewels, though the bread is nothing like jewels. It is square and stubborn, its corners sharp, its surface grainy like sandstone. Yet she lays it neatly, because care itself is a kind of seasoning. The smell of sour whey lingers in the air, not unpleasant, but strong enough to remind everyone that these are foods chosen for endurance rather than delight. Thora spoons mash into a small wooden bowl for her child, blending softened grain with a drop of milk kept carefully in a sealed skin. The baby mouths it sleepily, unconcerned with flavour, content with warmth and the steady hand that feeds. The rest of the crew glance over, smiling without words, because the sight of a child eating turns a hard meal into a hopeful one. It says that voyages continue, that lives stretch forward beyond the horizon. Leif, never one to talk more than necessary, chews methodically on a strip of fish, the lines of his face unreadable. He is not above humour, but he does not invite it. The sea holds his attention more than the barrel does, though now and then he tips the fish in mock salute to the horizon, as if to ask the gods whether they would, like a bite. Einar, watching, begins to turn the gesture into a verse, half chanting under his breath about offering the sea its own children, salted and chewed. The preparation of meals is itself a soundscape. Ropes creak as men lean against them, balancing bowls. Wooden spoons scrape against the rough grain of containers. The firebox crackles faintly, a controlled flame nurtured in its iron belly, smoke drifting upward only to vanish in the wind. The goats shift and stamp below, jealous of the grain. A chicken clucks indignantly, as though it has opinions about barley mash. Each sound is small, yet together they weave a fabric that holds the morning steady. When the first bite is taken, conversation turns softer, shaped by full mouths and careful chewing. One sailor remarks that the bread could patch a hull breach if nailed in place. Another insists that he once saw a man break a knife on such bread, and Bjorn immediately tests his own blade, rapping it against a crust until the blade's edge chips. He looks at the knife as if betrayed, then bows to the bread, declaring, "Truly, you are the stronger warrior." The crew erupt into laughter that lifts the mist heavier than the sun does. Humour is more than amusement here. It is seasoning, without which the salt of the fish would overwhelm the spirit. Between bites, stories drift like smoke. Someone remembers a cousin who swore that barrels of whey could predict storms by the way they swelled in the heat. Another recalls a winter when families survived on nothing but fish soup, and the smell never left the walls for years. These are not sagas of heroes, but the sagas of kitchens, of everyday endurance. They are no less precious. Sigrid hums as she eats, her weaving never far from her. She fingers a ribbon of cloth between mouthfuls, smoothing it as though it were a companion. Thora hums too, a lullaby grown from necessity, soothing the baby, soothing herself, soothing anyone whose thoughts drift too far into worry. The two melodies weave together, one high, one low, until the sound becomes part of the meal, like steam rising from a pot. The sea watches all of this with its patient breath. Waves slap against the hull, lifting, dropping, never in anger but always in authority. The ship tilts slightly, and a spoon slips from a sailor's grasp, spilling mash onto the deck. For a moment everyone groans at the waist, then Bjorn drops to his knees, scooping at the mess with exaggerated reverence, declaring it a gift for the gods of the planks. Einar, never missing the chance, mutters a couplet about deities with simple tastes, and even Leif's stern mouth bends into something almost like a smile. As the meal ends, bowls are rinsed with seawater, spoons wiped and tucked away. The barrel is closed again, its lid pressed down with the weight of future mornings. Rations must be measured, guarded, stretched across weeks of uncertainty. Yet no one lingers on scarcity. For now, stomachs are full enough, spirits are lighter, and laughter still hangs in the rigging like a blessing. You might imagine yourself there, bowl in hand, the taste of salt and smoke on your tongue, the warmth of a spoon between your fingers. The bread may resist your teeth, the fish may taste of endurance more than pleasure, but the company turns every bite into a comfort. Even the sea, vast and watchful, seems to approve, rocking the ship not too gently, not too roughly, but just enough to remind you that you are carried. Later, when hunger returns, as it always does, another barrel will open, another strip of fish will be chewed, another joke made at bread's expense. The cycle is steady, like the oars, like the waves, like the breath of the sea itself. Meals are not feasts here, but they are faithful, and in faith, the voyage endures. If your eyes begin to close with the rhythm of chewing, with the sound of laughter, with the smell of barley smoke, let them. The ship will keep moving, the crew will keep eating, the sea will keep rocking, and you will be safe to drift. On this ocean of routine, even rest is a kind of sustenance. Morning turns slowly into day, though here at sea the difference is subtle. Clouds linger, shifting their edges, sometimes thinning to let a thread of light through, sometimes gathering so thickly that the sky appears as solid as stone. The water reflects all of it faithfully, a mirror that ripples but does not lie. The ship drifts onward, not hurried, not stalled, simply steady in the wide grey breath of the Atlantic. It is during these quiet hours that the sea begins to show its companions, creatures that live unseen until they choose to reveal themselves. The first to appear are birds. A pale gull circles high, wings spread wide like a folded sheet of paper unfolding in the air. It gives a single cry, sharp and thin, then glides closer to the ship, peering down as though curious about these humans adrift. Bjorn squints upward and mutters that the gull is judging his haircut, which earns him a shove on the shoulder from Sigrid and a chuckle from those nearby. Another bird follows, darker, more purposeful. A raven, perhaps a cousin to the one released days before. It hovers a moment, then wheels away, disappearing into the horizon, as if to remind everyone that the world beyond water still exists. Leif, steady at the tiller, acknowledges the sight without comment. For him, birds are not symbols or omens but tools, part of the navigation he has learned to trust. Yet even he glances at the gull's path, watching its angle against the wind, reading something in the tilt of its wings. The others see more than practicality. They see companionship, the reminder that not all life is bound to wood and rope. The sky holds allies too, free yet somehow near. As the morning deepens, another presence arrives, larger, slower, carried on sound before sight. A low exhale rolls across the waves, a breath vast enough to belong to the sea itself. Heads turn. Einar lifts his hand, eyes wide, and whispers, "Whales!" The word spreads like a shiver. At first nothing is visible, only the faint plume of mist rising like a column in the distance. Then the shape appears, a broad back curving up from the water, dark and glistening, then sinking again with a quiet authority. A second follows, smaller, perhaps calf to the first. The sea closes behind them as if nothing had passed, but the echo of their presence remains, a resonance in the chest, as if your own heart has been reminded of its scale. The crew gather at the rail. Thora holds her child close, pointing with a gentle hand, though the baby only gurgles, more interested in her voice than the horizon. Sigrid leans forward, her weaving forgotten for once, eyes reflecting the shimmer on the water. Even Bjorn, usually loud, speaks softly, as though reluctant to break the spell. "Giants of the deep," he says, half in awe, half in jest. "I hope they do not envy our bread." The laughter is quiet this time, reverent, folded into wonder. Einar, never without words, murmurs a verse. The sea breathes secrets. Its lungs are larger than ours. To see them rise is to know that we are guests in their hall. He does not shout it. He lets the words fall like pebbles into still water, each ripple a meaning that drifts outward. The whales surface again, nearer now. You can hear the hollow rush of air from their blowholes, a sound both intimate and immense. It is the sound of survival, of lungs filling in the same rhythm as your own, though magnified 100-fold. A tail fin lifts once, slow and deliberate, then vanishes into the deep. The silence that follows is not empty but full, as if the sea itself has spoken, and now waits for your answer. Leif finally nods, satisfied. "They travel well," he says simply, and returns his gaze to the sail. For him, the sight of whales is confirmation. The sea is alive, and life honours life. The rest of the day passes with the afterglow of that encounter. The crew speak more softly, their work accompanied by glances toward the horizon, as though expecting the whales to reappear. Meals are eaten with less complaint, the bread less mocked, as if even Bjorn senses that humour must sometimes give way to respect. Thora hums to her child with new warmth, her lullaby carrying the rhythm of the whale's breath. Sigrid returns to her weaving, but now the shuttle's tap sounds gentler, like a heartbeat remembered. As dusk approaches, the sky clears just enough to reveal a scatter of stars. The sea reflects them in broken lines, shards of light trembling on every wave. The crew settle into their evening tasks, tying lines, checking barrels, preparing the deck for night. The gull returns briefly, coasting on the wind, then disappears again, leaving only the memory of its cry. You imagine yourself at the rail once more, the air cool against your face, the salt tang on your lips. You close your eyes, and you can still hear the whales, their breath a deep drumbeat beneath your own. You can still see the arc of their backs, the sweep of the tail, the way water curved away from them as if bowing, These images settle into you not as memory but as presence, as though part of the sea has lodged itself in your own rhythm. The night deepens, stars gather, the ship rocks steadily, a cradle on the ocean. Around you, the voices of the crew fade into whispers, laughter turned soft, songs hummed under breath. Even Bjorn, sprawling on a coil of rope, seems gentled, his snores already beginning like a drum marking the watches of the night. And as you listen, you might imagine the whales still below, moving in darkness, unseen but not gone, their bodies enormous yet graceful, their hearts beating in time with the ocean itself. You are part of that rhythm now, carried on it, sustained by it. If your eyes close, it is only to follow them into the deep, where silence is vast but never empty, where you're always held by water and song. Darkness at sea does not arrive suddenly, but lowers itself slowly, like a vast curtain of velvet being drawn across the horizon. At first, the day seems to resist, clinging to a dim silver light that lies over the waves like a thin cloth. Then the silver fades, the line of the horizon melts into the sky, and one by one the stars arrive, quietly, shyly, but with such persistence that soon the heavens are crowded with them. Out here, away from hearth fires and houses, the sky is an unbroken dome, so wide it makes you dizzy to stare too long, as though you could fall upward into it. The crew moves more quietly as night spreads. Work continues, sails checked, ropes tied off, animals settled, but voices soften, gestures slow, as though everyone feels the weight of the stars overhead. You notice how the planks creak more clearly when speech subsides, how the sea's breathing grows more distinct when laughter pauses. Thora wraps her child in an extra fold of wool and rocks him gently, humming the tune she sang earlier in the day, but now it has shifted into something slower, lower, more like a prayer than a lullaby. The baby presses his cheek into her shoulder and surrenders to sleep, small breaths lost in the larger breath of the sea. Sigrid sets aside her weaving for once. She leans against the rail, chin on her hands, eyes turned upward. "I have never seen so many," she murmurs. It is as if the gods emptied their treasure chest across the sky. Einar the Skald stands nearby, nodding in agreement, though he cannot resist turning her thought into verse. His voice is soft, more wind than sound. The sky is a cloak of silver threads, each star a bead sewn by unseen hands. To look upon it is to wear wonder, to walk in darkness dressed in light. No one claps, but they do not need to. The words linger, stitched into the night itself. Leaf, always vigilant, uses the stars less as jewels and more as guides. He points, out a cluster low on the horizon, marking the path westward. His voice is calm, certain. "There is our road," he says, though no road is visible, only an arrangement of points in the dark. To him, they are familiar as milestones along a village path. He does not need parchment maps or ink. The sky has been his parchment since boyhood, and the stars its letters. Bjorn, leaning nearby with a grin, pretends to squint. "I see nothing but pinpricks. If that is a road, I should hate to drive cattle along it." Laughter breaks the hush, not enough to banish it entirely, but enough to remind everyone that fear dissolves when humour finds its footing. The sea responds with its own illumination. As the ship cuts through the water, the wake glimmers faintly, alive with sparks of green and silver. Phosphorescent plankton, stirred by the hull, create a trail of light that follows faithfully behind. To gaze at it is to see a second set of stars, scattered not above but below. The crew point and whisper, marvelling at the way the ship seems to leave a glowing footprint in its path, as though it were walking across a sky that lies beneath instead of above. For a moment it feels as though the ship sails between two heavens, one reflected in the sea, the other blazing overhead. You imagine standing at the centre of it, head tilted back, arms open, caught in the space between two infinities. The air smells sharp with salt, cool against your cheeks, and each breath seems filled with light, as though you could drink the stars themselves. Einar cannot resist shaping this vision into words. He lifts his hands as though conducting the sea and sky together. "We're a line between mirrors," he says, a word written twice. Stars above, stars below, and us the ink between. His poetry drifts with the wind, fragile yet unforgettable. Sigrid smiles faintly, brushing hair from her eyes. "If we are ink," she says, "let it be red thread too, weaving us forward." She always returns to weaving. For her, the world is cloth, and even stars are stitches. Leif nods toward the northern sky, where the aurora begins to stir. At first, it is only a pale shimmer, a whisper of green bending like smoke. Then it strengthens, spilling across the darkness in great arcs of emerald and violet, rippling as though unseen fingers are drawing a curtain back and forth. Gasps escape the crew before they can stop themselves. Even those who have seen it before cannot help but react as though it were the first time. The aurora is not a thing one grows accustomed to. It is always a visitation. Thora lifts her child so the infant's sleepy eyes can catch a glimpse. "Look," she whispers, though the child cannot understand. "The sky dances for you." For a heartbeat, it seems true. The lights flicker, stretch, dissolve, and gather again, as if bending down to greet the ship. Bjorn spreads his arms wide, his voice loud enough to challenge the spectacle. "At last, the gods. Applaud my jokes," he shouts, earning laughter that blends oddly well with reverence. Humour does not cancel awe, it balances it, keeps it from tipping into fear. The aurora lingers for long minutes, shifting and shimmering, then slowly thins, retreating into the upper dark like a dream fading upon waking. Yet its afterimage stays burned into your vision, green ghosts trailing every blink. The plankton still glow in the wake, soft consolation for the sky's silence. As the night deepens, the ship moves steadily forward. Ropes creak in their familiar rhythm, the sail sighs with each swell, and voices fall to whispers or vanish entirely. The watch is set, men take turns at the tiller, but the mood is not heavy. The stars offer companionship, constant and untiring, and the sea hums beneath as though content. You imagine lying back on the deck, hands behind your head, eyes tracing the slow wheel of constellations. Each star feels personal, as if it has chosen to shine only for you, yet also communal, part of the net that holds the whole ship in its care. The glow of plankton rocks beside you, fading, sparking, fading again, like dreams too shy to remain. The sky above, the sea below, the ship between. This is the long night, and it does not demand effort. It only invites trust. If your eyes grow heavy here, it is only natural. The stars will keep their places. The aurora may return unannounced. The plankton will shimmer at every turn of the hull. You may let go, breathing with the sea, cradled by its rhythm, certain that you are held between two heavens until morning comes again. The morning is pale and hushed, the kind of light that carries no warmth yet still manages to paint everything in a faint silver. The sea is steady, rolling without haste, its rhythm as old as memory. The crew move with practiced steps, tending to ropes, adjusting the sail, settling animals. Yet beneath these ordinary motions lies a mood heavier than the planks underfoot, a sense that this voyage does not drift only on water, but also on the tides of stories carried in the minds of those aboard. Out here, with no land in sight and only the horizon to mark direction, tales become companions, and among them none carries a shadow quite like that of Erik the Red. It is Einar the Skald who gives the shadow its shape. He sits near the mast, his knife working carefully at a strip of driftwood, carving letters that only he can read. His voice rises low at first, almost a murmur, but soon it gathers strength, falling into rhythm with the creak of the ropes and the soft slap of water against the hull. "There was once a man," he begins, "whose hair burned like fire and whose temper was no less fierce. They called him Erik the Red. He was born in Norway, but blood followed him like a tide, and for that he was cast out. He went to Iceland, where land seemed broader, but again his anger spilled, and again he was exiled. Twice driven from soil, he turned to the sea, and in that exile he found Greenland." The crew gather closer, some leaning against the rail, some crouched on coils of rope. Thora shifts her child to one side so she can listen more easily, the baby's small head pillowed against her shoulder. Even Leif at the tiller keeps one ear turned to the words, though his eyes never leave the horizon. They all know parts of the story, but hearing it spoken aloud in the middle of the sea feels different. The ocean itself seems to listen. Sigrid frowns softly, her fingers worrying at a piece of wool she carries in her belt. "Exile upon exile," she says quietly. "How does a man carry so much banishment without breaking?" Einar nods, pausing his carving. Perhaps he did break, but in breaking he bent toward new shores. Outcasts must either fade or create worlds of their own. Bjorn cannot resist the chance to lighten the mood. He scratches at his beard, looks around at the company and mutters, "If a bad temper earns a man new lands, then I should start throwing tantrums before supper. By next week I'll be king of 3 islands and half a sandbar." Laughter ripples across the deck, quick and grateful. Even the goats below give a timely bleat, as if in agreement. Leif lets the laughter settle before speaking, his voice calm even. "It is not only anger that carries men outward," he says. "It is the refusal to stay where they are not wanted. Erik did not leave because he loved the sea. He left because the land left him." He glances at the crew, then back at the horizon. That is something to remember when waves feel like walls. Sometimes they are doors. The sea answers with a deeper roll, rocking the ship in a long, slow motion that tilts every head toward the same horizon. The sound of water rushing along the hull seems to underline the story. Einar continues, his tone quieter now, as though speaking to each man and woman individually. Erik named the land Greenland, though much of it was white with ice. Some say he named it so to make others follow, for who would not sail toward a place that promises green? Words can build worlds as surely as axes. Sigrid shakes her head, half smiling. Then he was a weaver too, though his thread was not wool but lies. Not lies, Einar corrects gently, but persuasion. He gave harshness a hopeful name. Sometimes hope must be painted before it is believed. Thora rocks her child, eyes half closed, and whispers, "Even an exile can become an ancestor." Her words are soft, but they settle over the group like a cloak. The baby stirs, then sighs, sinking deeper into sleep as if carried by the thought as much as by the sea. The conversation lingers, drifting into reflection. Some stare at the waves as though they might reveal what Greenland looked like when Erik first saw it. Others picture the man himself, fiery hair tangled by wind, eyes searching for a shore that would not cast him out. The story is not only about him, it is about all who sail now. Every exile, every migrant, every family huddled on this deck with their goats and chickens is writing their own Greenland, though they do not yet know its name. Bjorn breaks the hush again, this time more gently. He nudges the barrel of dried fish with his foot and sighs dramatically. If exile means eating more of this, then perhaps we should all behave ourselves and stay home. Laughter rises again, softer but warmer this time, easing the heaviness without erasing it. The sea darkens slightly as a cloud passes overhead, shadowing the ship. For a moment the water seems endless and the story heavier than before. But then the cloud shifts, a narrow band of light spills down, and the surface glitters once more. It feels like a reminder that even stories of exile contain openings, that even shadows bend when the light moves. Einar closes his tale with a final line, simple and steady. Erik's anger sent him away. His exile gave him a kingdom. We sail not with his temper, but with his lesson. He sets aside the carved wood, unfinished but marked with the shapes of runes, and the crew disperse slowly, each carrying the story like a private weight. You might imagine yourself sitting among them, the salt air in your lungs, the planks warm under your hand. You can feel the story too, not as distant history but as presence, as though Erik's shadow truly stood at the rail, watching the horizon alongside you. You know that outcasts do not vanish, they become maps for those who follow. Perhaps that is why his name endures, not to glorify the anger, but to remind every voyager that banishment can bloom into belonging if one has the courage to keep sailing. Night begins to press its cool fingers across the sky, and the crew turn to their duties. The ship creaks, the sail whispers, the water laps in endless refrain. The shadow of Erik the Red lingers, but it does not feel oppressive now. It feels instructive, a reminder written in exile and ice, that new worlds are born not only of conquest, but of refusal to disappear, and as the stars prepare to gather again above, you too can let the story settle within you. If your eyes close here, they close not in fear, but in recognition. Shadows may follow, but so too does the promise of light. The ship will carry you forward, as Erik once carried his exile, until new shores appear. The sea, when it wishes, can soften its voice until it is no more than a murmur against the planks, a steady hush that cradles rather than commands. On this day, the waves are gentle and the sky a low ceiling of mist, so the ship feels less like a vessel braving an ocean and more like a cradle rocking across a giant's breath. In this quieter mood, eyes turn not only to the horizon but also to one another, to the people who keep the ship's heart beating. Among them, it is the women whose presence threads strength through the journey, often quiet, often overlooked, but as necessary as the mast or the sail. Sigrid sits cross-legged near the stern, her loom a small portable frame balanced across her knees. She hums softly as her fingers guide the shuttle, thread slipping through thread, red line over grey line over brown, until the fabric grows inch by inch. It is not a grand cloth, no tapestry meant for a chieftain's hall, but a strip of wool that will bind a chest or serve as a belt. Yet each pass of the shuttle is steady, each knot exact, and watching her is to see patience itself given form. The crew know that cloth is more than clothing. It is rope, sail patch, blanket, cradle. Sigrid's weaving is not decoration. It is survival, wrapped in rhythm. Einar the Skald drifts closer, drawn as always to rhythm. Your threads, he says, watching her hands, are like verses, each line plain enough alone, but together they make meaning. Sigrid does not look up, though a smile flickers. Then may my cloth be sturdier than your poems, she replies, earning a laugh from those nearby. Even Leif, who rarely laughs, allows the corner of his mouth to bend. The child in Thora's arms stirs and fusses, hands batting at the air. Thora soothes him with a low hum, but the baby's restless fingers find their way to Sigrid's yarn basket. With the sudden determination only infants can muster, he pulls, and the neat ball of yarn leaps free, rolling across the deck like a runaway star. The thread unspools in a long line, tangling first around Bjorn's boot, then snaring the handle of a bucket, then wrapping itself across Einar's lap. For a breath, silence reigns as everyone takes in the sight. Then laughter erupts. Bjorn pretends to stumble dramatically, clutching at the railing as though bound by sorcery. The child has cast a spell, he bellows. Quick, fetch a priest. or I will be dragged into the sea by this demon yarn." The goats below bleat in agreement, or perhaps in protest, and Einar shakes his head, muttering that even his poetry has not trapped so many at once. Sigrid sighs in mock exasperation, rising to untangle the chaos, yet even she cannot keep a straight face as she winds the thread back, scolding the baby gently though her eyes are fond. "Already," she says, "he ties men into knots. What will he do when he grows?" Thora kisses the child's head, her voice soft. "He will weave his own stories, as we all must." The words fall into the air with a weight beyond their sound. They remind everyone listening that voyagers are not carried only by strength of arm or steadiness of hand. They are carried by the hope of those who will come after, by women who nurse that hope, weave it, cradle it, steady it. Leif clears his throat, a sound that gathers attention without effort. "Men may steer a ship," he says, eyes on the horizon, "but it is women who give us reason to keep steering." He does not embellish, and his tone is simple, but the crew nod, accepting the truth in it. In the sagas, heroes are named, battles remembered, but those who weave, nurse, mend, and anchor. Families into being are just as vital. Without them, even the greenest land would remain empty. Einar, moved by the moment, shapes a verse on the spot. Threads bind chest to chest, songs bind night to day. But women bind the voyage, so we do not drift away. The words are met with soft smiles rather than applause. Some things are too true to cheer. The rest of the day carries this gentler rhythm. Sigrid resumes her weaving, her shuttle clicking softly like a heartbeat. Thora rocks her child, her voice weaving a different kind of fabric in the air. Even Gudrid's name is spoken, the legendary woman who travelled further than many men, reaching Vinland across seas no one thought survivable. If Gudrid could walk new lands and bear children there, Thora murmurs, then surely we can carry our little ones across this stretch of water. Bjorn, of course, breaks the solemnity by pointing at the yarn basket, but perhaps we should leave the child ashore next time. Unless we need another anchor. Laughter follows, warm and easy, and Sigrid tosses a scrap of cloth at him, which he pretends is a royal gift. As evening descends, the ship glows with a quieter comfort. No grand feasts, no triumphant songs, only the steady work of hands weaving, rocking, mending, feeding. The women do not boast, yet their presence steadies the voyage more than sails or oars. You imagine the deck in twilight, the soft rasp of shuttle through wool, the gentle hum of a lullaby, the warmth of laughter after tangled yarn. These are not grand gestures, yet they are the threads that keep the world from unravelling. If your eyes grow heavy here, let them. Imagine the fabric Sigrid weaves, each thread a path of safety, each knot a promise. Imagine Thora's lullaby, rocking you as it rocks her child. Imagine the ship itself, not only wood and rope, but a tapestry held together by countless unseen hands. Close your eyes and know that you too are woven into the voyage, safe within its fabric until dawn returns. By the time the sun rises higher, silver light breaking through rags of cloud, the ship has shifted into the serious business of keeping itself alive upon the ocean. At sea, hours are not measured by clocks with polished faces, but by the pulse of labour, by the rhythm of oars and the turning of an hourglass. Work is the true heartbeat of a voyage, and every member of the crew must learn its beat. Leif stands at the tiller, broad-shouldered and patient, his eyes always balancing the horizon with the feel of the rudder in his hands. He does not bark orders often, but when he does, they fall as clearly as gull cries. Trim the sail, he calls, and two men leap forward, ropes in hand, adjusting the angle so the canvas bulges just enough to drink the wind without tearing. The sail groans, ropes creak, and suddenly the ship leans more willingly into its course, gliding faster over the swell. The crew grin at one another as though they themselves had whispered to the sea and been obeyed. Bjorn naturally provides commentary. As he braces a rope in his hands, he shouts, "If the wind grows any stronger, it will pull me into the sky. Then you shall have Bjorn the Raven circling overhead and demanding dried fish as tribute." The others laugh, and someone mutters that the gods would send him back out of sheer noise. The work does not end there. Oars must be shipped out when the wind slackens, their blades digging rhythmically into the water. The sound is heavy but steady, wood entering waves, pulling, rising, dripping, and settling again. It is almost a drum beat, and in that beat men find the strength to keep going. Their bodies lean forward and back, until the whole crew moves like a single muscle. Even those not rowing feel the pulse, their breaths falling in time with the motion. The baby, rocked against Thora's chest, drifts into sleep again, lulled by the deep cadence of labour. To mark these shifts in duty, an hourglass is turned near the mast. Its sand trickles silently, measuring not minutes, but endurance. When the last grain falls, another watch begins. A small bell is rung, its tone thin but far-reaching, and the sound cuts cleanly through wind and water. One man steps back from the oar bench, another takes his place, and so the ship keeps its rhythm without faltering. The bell, though small, becomes the voice of time itself. Sigrid hums as she works, not weaving today, but mending a corner of sailcloth that is frayed. Her needle flashes in and out of the heavy wool, the thread bright against the grey fabric. Each stitch is firm, each knot secure. The sail above may look grand and effortless, but it is Sigrid's steady hands that keep it whole. "A ship sails as much on patience as on wind," she murmurs, and the truth of it is plain. The crew's chatter keeps spirits lifted. One man insists he has rowed so strongly that the ship must be flying over fish faster than they can swim. Bjorn counters by claiming that his snore alone propels the vessel, which sparks a round of groans and playful shouts. "It is true," he protests, pretending outrage. "Did you not hear it last night? A storm in my nose that shook the planks. Even Thor himself would envy such thunder." The men laugh, and Thora shakes her head, though even she smiles as she rocks her child. The work continues, watch after watch, the day stretching in long silver strands. Ropes are coiled and uncoiled, barrels checked, animals fed, tools sharpened. The ship itself seems to breathe with the labour, its timbers flexing and sighing in answer. Each creak of the hull is a reminder that it too is alive, shaped by human hands but still bearing the soul of the forest from which it was born. Leaf keeps his gaze steady, occasionally glancing at the sun when the clouds break, enough to reveal its path. He touches his sunstone once, though he does not need it now, more ritual than necessity. The sea is calm enough, the course sure enough, yet his vigilance never wavers. "The ocean rewards attention," he says quietly. "The moment you look away, it reminds you." His words sink into the crew like another kind of knot, binding them to their work. As evening draws near, the watch bell rings again, its note clear against the gathering dusk. The oars are pulled in, the sail adjusted once more, and the crew settle into quieter tasks. Barrels are checked for leaks, the firebox coaxed into life for the evening meal. The baby wakes and fusses, tugging at Thora's sleeve until she feeds him, his small sounds mingling with the deeper groans of the ship. Bjorn pretends to fall asleep instantly, snoring loudly enough to draw laughter, and Sigrid flicks a piece of thread at him to shut him up. The sun dips low, painting the waves in bruised gold and grey. The hourglass is turned again, the sand beginning its silent fall, and the bell is rung. Another watch begins, another thread in the endless fabric of the voyage. The crew know this rhythm now. Work, rest, work again. Guided by the turning of sand and the sounding of a bell. It is a pattern that steadies the mind as much as it drives the ship forward. You can imagine yourself leaning into that rhythm, feeling the weight of the oar, the tug of the rope, the vibration of the hull under your feet. Each sound is a measure of time, the slap of water, the scrape of wood, the faint chime of the bell. They weave together until the ship feels like a great instrument being played by many hands. And in that music, there is room for laughter, for snores, for lullabies. If your eyes begin to close here, let them. The watch continues whether you wake or not. The sand falls, the bell rings, the oars dip and rise, the sail drinks the wind. Work and watch, watch and work. The rhythm is steady, endless, and safe. You may rest within it as the crew do, rocked by labour's quiet music until dawn comes again. Night comes with the softness of a cloak laid gently across the shoulders of the sea. The last light of the sun bleeds out of the horizon, leaving only a thin band of rose before surrendering to grey, then black. Stars prick through the darkness one by one, timid at first, then boldly, until the whole sky is bright with them. The air carries a damp chill, sharper than in daylight, and every breath tastes faintly of salt and iron. The ship rocks patiently, as if it too understands that the day's work has ended and now is the time for stillness. Einar the Skald waits until the bustle has faded before rising. He has been quiet all day, his knife idle, his words stored like grain in a sealed jar. Now, with the watch set and the crew gathering into their cloaks, he clears his throat softly and lifts his voice. He does not shout. He does not need to. The sea is hushed. The ropes only creak occasionally, and every ear is tuned for something beyond the ordinary. His words come slow, steady, like waves folding onto shore. The water speaks with endless tongue, but gives no name to those who sail. It holds us gently, it holds us hard, it hums our cradle, it tests our will. The crew listen, faces dimly lit by lantern glow. Even the animals seem quieter, the goat's usual restlessness subdued, as if they too are listening. Thora rocks her child, eyes closed, letting the verse braid itself into a lullaby. Sigrid sits with her hands folded in her lap, her weaving set aside, her gaze fixed on the mast where the carved hammer still hangs like a guardian. Leif, still at the tiller, tilts his head slightly as though steering not only the ship but also the words themselves. Einar's voice dips lower, finding the rhythm of the water against the hull. The night is wide, the stars are near, they sew the dark with silver thread. We walk between them, wave and flame, our names unspoken, our hearts alight. He pauses then, allowing the silence to swell. The crew shift only slightly, unwilling to disturb the moment. The contrast between the Skald's words and the sea's murmurs is striking. The waves are constant, wordless, immense. The poem is brief, fragile, made of breath. Yet in that fragility lies comfort. Words cannot outlast the ocean, but they can cradle the heart as it drifts across it. Bjorn, who cannot remain solemn for long, lets out a soft snort. "Well spoken," he says, "but if I sing, the whales themselves will rise to silence me." The laughter that follows is gentle, not rowdy, a ripple rather than a crash. Einar inclines his head gravely, as though granting Bjorn the last line of the poem itself. The watch bell rings once, its tone thin and clear, marking the shift of duty. A new man takes the tiller while Leif stretches his shoulders, though he does not stray far. The bell's chime seems to join the poem, a single bright note suspended in the night. The hourglass is turned, sand beginning its silent fall. Time is kept, but gently. Above, the constellations wheel slowly. The crew do not name them all, but they know enough to guide their path. The stars are both compass and company. One sailor points out a cluster shining like a string of beads, and Einar murmurs that perhaps the gods dropped it while sowing the heavens. Another swears he saw a star fall, a streak of silver vanishing into the black. The ship murmurs with these quiet observations, a chorus of small voices beneath the vast silence. The baby stirs, whimpers once, then quiets again, soothed by Thora's low hum. Her song blends with Einar's poem, and for a moment it is difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. Perhaps that is the point. Words, songs and waves all merging into a single lullaby. You might imagine lying back on the deck yourself, eyes tracing the constellations, ears filled with the rhythm of sea and verse. The wood beneath you is cool, the air sharp, but there is comfort in the closeness of bodies huddled together, each person wrapped in cloak and story alike. You are part of a circle, small against the horizon but whole within itself. Einar closes with one final stanza, his voice almost a whisper. If sleep should take you, let it come. The sea will keep, the stars will turn. Your breath will match the ocean's breath. Your dream will sail until the dawn. The crew sigh, not out of weariness but out of agreement. Some settle deeper into their cloaks, others stretch against the rail, eyes on the sky. Bjorn mumbles something about composing his own saga tomorrow, though the snores that soon follow suggest he will forget. The night deepens, the stars continue their patient wheel, the sea holds the ship steady. You may let your eyes close now, carried not only by the rocking of the hull, but also by the rhythm of words that are folded around you like another sail. Sleep is not a danger here, it is part of the voyage, as essential as oars and ropes. Daylight creeps across the sea as if poured from a slow jug, thin at first, then widening until the water glimmers with a sheen of pewter. The crew stir awake, shaking out cloaks stiff with damp stretching muscles still heavy from labour. Voices rise in low chatter, and soon the ship is alive again, not with hurried work but with stories, questions, and the peculiar hum of superstition that always thickens when people spend too long in the company of water. It begins with a shout from one of the younger sailors who leans over the side, pointing excitedly. "Dolphins!" he cries, his voice sharp with delight. Heads turn quickly, and indeed a small pod of them surfaces near the bow, sleek backs arcing like blades of polished stone. They leap together in rhythm, keeping pace with the ship, then dive again, leaving trails of silver bubbles in their wake. For a moment everyone watches, even Leif at the tiller, though he pretends otherwise. The sight of dolphins chasing a ship has long been taken as good fortune. Their presence feels like a blessing, as though the sea itself has loaned guardians to swim alongside. The crew break into chatter. One man claims that dolphins appear only when a voyage is destined for success. Another insists they are messengers of Aegir, the sea god, sent to remind mortals to respect the waves. Einar, never missing a chance for a story, recites a half-remembered verse about dolphins carrying drowned sailors to the halls of the gods. His voice turns solemn. If they swim with us, it means our souls are already promised safe passage. Bjorn, of course, refuses to let the mood remain too reverent. He slaps his thigh and declares, "Or perhaps they only want to hear me sing." Even dolphins know good company when they find it. He begins to hum, horribly off-key, and the crew erupt into laughter. One sailor swears the dolphins dive deeper out of embarrassment, which only makes the laughter louder. But as quickly as joy rises, suspicion is never far behind. From the stern comes a cry of dismay. A grey-haired sailor points at the deck near the food stores where a small rat scurries, whiskers twitching, eyes bright. The mood shifts instantly. "A rat," the man curses, "ill luck worse than storm." His words hang heavy, and the crew exchange nervous glances. Some spit over the side to ward off evil, others mutter charms under their breath. The argument begins at once. One sailor insists that rats mean sinking ships, that they sense disaster before humans can. Another counters that rats are good luck, for they are clever survivors, and a ship that feeds them cannot starve its crew. Voices grow louder, the line between jest and seriousness blurring. A barrel is knocked as two men shout over one another, one swearing the rat must be killed, the other shouting it must be left alone. Sigrid finally stands, her weaving set aside, her voice calm but firm. "Enough," she says, and though she does not shout, the sound still carries. The men quiet, perhaps embarrassed to be scolded, perhaps soothed by the steadiness in her tone. She steps toward the rat, which freezes near the barrel, its tiny body trembling with fear. With a careful hand, she picks up a scrap of hard bread and places it gently on the deck. The rat scurries to it, snatches the food and darts away into the shadows, vanishing from sight. "There," she says, dusting her hands. "The rat is neither curse nor blessing. It is only another traveller hungry like us. Let it eat, and may it carry no worse luck than the dolphins bring good." The crew exchange glances, some nodding, others grumbling, but none argue further. The tension dissolves into chuckles, and someone mutters that if rats eat Bjorn's bread, then perhaps they will leave the rest of them in peace. Bjorn clutches his provisions to his chest with exaggerated horror. "If it touches my bread, it may take my life as well." "One curse at a time, please." Laughter breaks again, louder and freer now, sweeping away the remnants of fear. Leif, steady at the tiller, allows himself a small smile. He has seen men undone by quarrels as easily as by storms, and he knows that laughter is a sturdier sail than anger. He nods once towards Sigrid, acknowledging her wisdom, though he says nothing. The ship steadies itself, not only in wood and rope, but also in spirit. As the day stretches onward, the dolphins vanish into the distance, their silver arcs becoming memory. The rat is not seen again, though the crew glance at the shadows from time to time, half expecting whiskers to reappear. Stories continue to weave themselves among the men, tales of sailors lost who claimed dolphins saved them, of rats fleeing burning houses, of omens mistaken and fortunes misread. Each voice adds a thread, and together they form a tapestry of superstition, colourful and contradictory, but somehow comforting. You might imagine leaning against the rail yourself, listening to these arguments not with fear but with amusement. The sea is vast, and humans fill it with stories so that it feels less empty. Dolphins become guardians, rats become warnings, laughter becomes a charm against the unknown. These tales do not change the waves or steer the ship, but they steady hearts, and sometimes that is enough. As evening comes, the sky softens into grey again, and the sea whispers along the hull. The crew settle, some still muttering about omens, others joking about Bjorn's bread, but all a little lighter for having argued, laughed, and remembered that fear shrinks when shared. If your eyes grow heavy here, let them. Picture the dolphins leaping, bright arcs against a shining sea. Picture the rat nibbling bread in the shadows, no curse, no blessing, only hunger. Picture the laughter of sailors carried by wind across endless water. Let the superstitions drift as stories, no heavier than clouds, while you rest easy in the knowledge that the ship sails on steady and whole. The sea does not always whisper. Sometimes it rises to its full height and speaks in a voice that shakes even the bravest marrow. The morning begins with an uneasy wind, a restless murmur in the ropes, and a quickening of waves that slap harder against the hull. Leif notices before the rest. His eyes narrow at the dark smudge building on the horizon. He tilts his head, listening as though the sea itself is confiding a secret. By the time the others glance up, the smudge has swelled into a wall of cloud, rolling forward with a speed that is both magnificent and frightening. The air thickens, dampness clings to every surface. Sigrid's loom is stowed hastily, her weaving half done but forgotten. Thora wraps her child tightly, pressing him against her chest, while Bjorn mutters that the gods must be jealous of his jokes. No one laughs this time. Even humour feels fragile against the oncoming weight of the storm. It begins with wind, sudden and fierce. The sail thrashes like a living creature desperate to flee, and men leap to ropes, hauling with all their might to keep the canvas from tearing free. The The sound is deafening. Fabric snapping, wood groaning, ropes screaming against strain. Rain lashes sideways, stinging the skin, blurring sight until sea and sky merge into one grey fury. The ship tilts sharply, water rushing across the deck, and for a moment it feels as though the ocean might simply swallow everything whole. Leif's voice cuts through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Reef the sail! Hold fast!" His orders come like iron nails hammered into the storm, and the crew cling to them as if to lifelines. Oars are drawn in to keep them from snapping, barrels lashed tighter, animals crying out in fear below. The calf lows, the goats bleat wildly, the chickens flutter madly in their cage. Even their cries are swallowed by the roar of the storm. Einar clings to the mast, his hair plastered against his face, and mutters half a verse that no one hears. Bjorn, caught between terror and bravado, bellows into the wind, "If I drown, let it be with bread in my mouth." He stuffs a crust between his teeth and immediately chokes on seawater, spluttering even as he laughs at his own foolishness. The laughter, ragged though it is, cuts a thin line of light into the blackness. The storm grows wilder. Waves rise like black cliffs, each one towering higher than the last, crashing down with force enough to shake the ship to its bones. The hull groans, flexing but holding, oak answering ocean with stubborn resilience. The crew cling to ropes, their knuckles white, their muscles straining with each command. The air smells of salt and iron and fear. Lightning flashes, illuminating faces pale with effort, eyes wide and unblinking. Thunder follows, rolling like the voice of giants across the sky. Time becomes slippery. Moments stretch, each wave an eternity, each crash of water a new birth of fear. The hourglass is forgotten, the bell silent. Only survival marks the passing of time now. Thora hums to her child even in the chaos, voice trembling but present, a thin thread of calm woven through the storm. Sigrid braces beside her, one hand gripping the mast, the other steadying Thora's shoulder. Their strength becomes a wall, holding the child safe even as the world crashes around them. At last, after what feels like hours though, may only be minutes, the wind begins to shift. The rain eases slightly, the waves still high but less furious. Leif senses it first. His shoulders drop though his grip remains firm. He calls for the sail to be eased, for ropes to be checked, for the crew to breathe again. Slowly, slowly the storm's voice lowers, its rage giving way to exhaustion. The sea, like a giant spent from shouting, settles back into heavy but steady breathing. Dawn breaks behind the clouds, pale and tentative. The ship drips with rain, the deck strewn with stray ropes and scattered tools, but it floats, whole and stubborn. The crew, soaked to the skin, slump against the rail or collapse onto coils of rope, their chests heaving, their eyes still wide with the memory of waves higher than houses. Bjorn coughs, spits out a sodden crust of bread and croaks, "I told you I'd survive with bread in my mouth." This time the laughter is real, rolling across the deck like sunlight piercing through cloud. Einar finally raises his head, voice hoarse but steady, and recites. The storm roared, the sea rose, but the ship bent and did not break. We are small, but we are many, and the ocean has not yet taken us. The crew nod, too tired for cheer but grateful for the words. They know they will remember this night, not only for its terror but for its survival. You may picture yourself there, drenched to the bone, your hands raw from gripping rope, your breath ragged but alive. The storm has passed, leaving behind a hush that feels almost sacred. The sea is calmer now, though still powerful, its surface rolling in long dark swells. The ship creaks but sails on, and the dawn, fragile and grey, spreads slowly across the horizon. If your eyes close now, let them. The storm has already been weathered, The ship still holds, the crew still laugh, the sea has spent its rage. Rest in the calm that follows, knowing that no storm lasts forever, and every dawn carries its own quiet victory. The sea has many moods, and after rage sometimes comes indifference. Days after the storm, the ship drifts into a place where the water lies flat as hammered pewter, smooth and endless, without a hint of breeze to ruffle it. The sail hangs limp, a weary flag without pride, its folds heavy and useless against the mast. The oars dip now and then, but even they feel reluctant, dragging more than cutting, moving water without conviction. There is no sound of crests breaking, no cries of seabirds, no laughter carried by wind. It is as though the world has pressed pause, holding ship and crew in a long breath that never quite exhales. At first, the stillness seems like mercy after the storm. The crew welcome the chance to dry their cloaks, to rest bruised muscles, to stretch without being flung from one rail to another. But as hours turn into a day, then another, the calm grows heavy. Silence can weigh more than thunder. With no wind, the air turns thick, pressing against skin like a damp cloth. Every sound, the creak of rope, the scuff of a boot, the sigh of a goat below, lands too loudly, echoing in the emptiness. Thora fans her child with a fold of wool, her hand moving steadily though her eyes grow tired. The baby fusses, sensitive to the stagnant air, and even her lullaby seems to falter in the stillness. Sigrid sits with her weaving, but the shuttle moves slower than usual, as though the threads themselves have lost interest. Einar scratches verses onto wood, yet his mutter lacks rhythm, his words wandering without shape. Bjorn sprawls dramatically on a coil of rope, one arm across his forehead. Even the fish are bored, he groans. If one leapt aboard, it would only yawn before dying. A few chuckles answer, but even laughter feels subdued, muffled by the sluggish air. Leif remains at the tiller, his posture unchanging, his eyes fixed on a horizon that refuses to shift. His silence is steady, but even steadiness has weight. The men glance at him from time to time, seeking reassurance, though none is given. In doldrums, reassurance is as scarce as wind. The ship creaks with every roll, a tired body shifting on its bed. Barrels are checked and rechecked, animals fed more out of habit than need. The goats chew half-heartedly, the calf lies down, the chickens doze. All things seem suspended in this thick, breathless moment. The sun, pale behind haze, burns without passion, its light flattening the sea into dull metal. Hours blur together until time itself feels stalled, measured only by the slow trickle of sand through the hourglass and the weary clang of the watch bell. Superstition stirs more strongly in stillness than in storm. Men mutter about the gods withholding wind to test patience, or about spirits of the drowned pressing their weight on the air. One swears he heard whispering from beneath the hull, voices of those who sailed before and never returned. Another spits over the side, claiming the ocean demands an offering. Bjorn offers to throw himself in as tribute, if only the sea promises to spit him back out with better bread. The laughter this time is genuine, but brief, soon swallowed by the oppressive calm. Sigrid finally stands, stretching her arms as if to shake off the weight. The wind will come when it chooses, she says, her voice quiet but firm. We cannot order it. We can only wait. She begins humming, a tune steady and unhurried, weaving sound into the silence like a thread through empty cloth. Thora joins softly, her lullaby folding into the melody. Slowly the crew lean into the sound, finding in it a rhythm that the sea has refused them. Einar lifts his voice, adding words to the tune, his verse shaped not for grandeur but for patience. The sea is a mirror, it shows us our own faces. We are small, but we are still. We wait, and waiting is its own kind of voyage. The words linger, absorbed by the unmoving air, but they do not vanish. They rest on the crew like a shared breath, easing some of the weight. Even Leif's mouth softens, though his eyes remain fixed ahead. Evening arrives slowly, without drama, the sun sinking into haze rather than flame. The water reflects it like dull bronze, the sky darkening without protest. Lanterns are lit, their glow small but reassuring against the heavy gloom. The ship rocks gently, as though cradling the crew despite its own fatigue. Bjorn sighs loudly, sprawling again. Wake me when the wind remembers us, or at least when the fish regain their sense of humour. This time the laughter is warmer, and Sigrid flicks a scrap of yarn at him. The baby settles, soothed by Thora's steady hum. The goats shift and stamp, restless but alive. The silence is still thick, but within it there are threads of endurance, small reminders that patience itself can be strength. You may imagine lying on the deck, the wood warm beneath you, the air heavy but safe. The stars appear faintly through haze, distant but present. The lull of the ship is slower now, more deliberate, like a mother rocking a child already asleep. The silence does not threaten, it holds. If your eyes close here, they close into patience, into stillness, into the certainty that even when nothing seems to move, the voyage continues. When the sea finally exhales after days of stubborn stillness, the shift is so small at first that no one quite believes it. A faint breath stirs across the deck, barely enough to ruffle a strand of hair, yet it is different from the dead air that pressed upon them before. Leif feels it most keenly. He lifts his head, eyes narrowing, and runs a hand along the edge of the sailcloth. Wind, he murmurs, a single word that carries more relief than any prayer. The sail swells slightly, a weary chest filling after too long without breath. The ship responds instantly, as though it too had been waiting for this moment. The timbers creak with a livelier tone, the ropes strain with purpose, and the bow nudges forward as if waking from a dream. The crew stir, first in disbelief, then in cheer, voices lifting with the wind itself. Bjorn flings his arms wide and declares, "At last! The sea remembers us." I was beginning to think we were painted on it like decorations. The wind strengthens as morning lengthens, carrying with it the scent of salt sharpened, almost metallic, and something else, something faint and promising. Sigrid lifts her head, sniffing the air. "Do you smell it?" she asks softly. "Not water, not rain, something green." Her words ripple across the crew. Men lean over the rail, eyes scanning the horizon. At first there is nothing but the usual haze, sea and sky stitched in grey thread. But then slowly a darker smudge emerges, low and solid against the pale line. A cry rises from the bow. "Land!" The smudge grows with each heartbeat, sharpening into the outline of rock, of slope, of shoreline where waves break against stone. Seabirds appear suddenly, wheeling and crying overhead, their calls sharp and insistent. The dolphins, absent for days, return briefly, leaping alongside as though to escort the ship to its prize. The sight and sound together wash the crew in renewed energy. Leif keeps his voice steady, though even he cannot hide the small lift at the corner of his mouth. "We will hold course," he says. "Prepare to beach." Orders ripple outward. Oars are readied, ropes checked, the sail trimmed so the ship glides with precision toward the shore. Thora presses her child close, murmuring softly as if to tell him that even the sea must eventually give way to stone. As they draw nearer, the shoreline resolves into detail. A small island, barren of trees but not of life. Flat rocks glisten with spray, while farther up the beach a group of seals bask, fat bodies sprawled in the sun. Their barks echo like rough laughter, carrying across the water. Bjorn cups his hands around his mouth and calls back, "Save a place by the fire, cousins." The crew laugh, their tension dissolving into mirth. The ship nudges into the shallows and oars push it gently toward a stretch of gravel, where it can be grounded safely. Men leap into the surf, boots splashing, pulling ropes and guiding the hull until it rests steady on the beach. The sound of waves on stone is different from waves against a hull, sharper, more final. It is the sound of arrival. Feet touch land for the first time in weeks, and the relief is palpable. Some kneel, instinctively, pressing their palms against the damp stones as though to anchor themselves. Others stretch their arms wide, drinking in the steadiness beneath them. Thora steps carefully with her child, letting his small foot press onto rock for the first time in his life. She kisses his brow and whispers, "The earth has not forgotten you." Sigrid unpacks a bundle quickly, pulling out flint and kindling. Soon, a fire crackles on the beach, the sound almost startling after so many days of silence and water. Smoke rises into the air, sharp and comforting, carrying the scent of wood and warmth. The crew gather around it, steaming as they peel off damp cloaks, laughter spilling as freely as the sparks. Bjorn holds his hands over the flames, then turns dramatically, proclaiming, "At last, food that tastes of fire and not of barrels!" Someone hands him a strip of dried fish, and he waves it like a trophy before dropping it onto the coals, declaring it improved already. Einar, always ready, begins a verse as he warms his hands. The sea withheld, the sky was mute, but wind returned, and stone received us. The fire sings now, and hearts grow light, for land is promise kept. The seals bark again, their rough voices joining the rhythm of the poem. A few shuffle closer, curious, watching with their wide dark eyes. Bjorn tosses a scrap of fish toward them, which they ignore, preferring their own catch. "Ungrateful hosts," he mutters, which sparks another round of laughter. The crew eat heartily, savouring the luxury of hot food and solid ground. The firelight flickers on their faces, softening the exhaustion carved there. For a few hours, the hardships of sea feel distant, replaced by warmth, by smoke curling upward, by seals grumbling in chorus with Bjorn's jokes. Even the animals relax. Goats nibbling calmly at seaweed, chickens fluffing their feathers on dry stones, the calf lying content near the warmth. You may imagine yourself there, sitting by the fire, the crackle mingling with the sigh of waves. The heat reaches your skin, the smoke curls through your hair, the ground beneath you solid, dependable, after weeks of shifting decks. Around you, voices rise in laughter and song, gentle and unforced. Above, the sky clears to reveal stars once more, steady as they always were, though tonight they seem kinder, less remote. As the flames burn low and the crew settle into cloaks, drowsiness comes easily. The sea has been patient, the wind has returned, the land has offered a resting place. If your eyes close now, they close not in weariness alone, but in gratitude, in the relief of stone after water, of warmth after silence. The voyage continues, but tonight the ship rests, and so may you. The first sign is not a shape upon the horizon, but a smell, faint yet unmistakable, drifting across the deck like a secret carried on the wind. It is sharp, mineral, almost sour, with a bite of struck flint and the ghost of smoke hidden in its breath. Some wrinkle their noses, others lift their heads in sudden recognition. Leif's eyes narrow, his hand tightening on the tiller, and he nods once, more to himself than to the crew. "Land," he says, though no land is yet visible. "Iceland." The smell strengthens as the morning grows, mixing with the usual salt of the sea until the air feels heavier, denser, as though the world itself is breathing from a deeper chest. The crew gather near the bow, straining their eyes. At first the horizon remains blank, a flat seam where sky and water stitch together. But then, slowly, a darker blur takes form. First a smear, then a jagged line, then the unmistakable outline of cliffs rising where water ends. A ripple of excitement runs through the ship, murmurs breaking into cheers. Bjorn spreads his arms wide, declaring, "At last! A rock to argue with instead of each other." The land grows clearer with every breath of wind. Black sands fringe the shore, glittering darkly where waves curl upon them. Behind, cliffs rise in stark layers, their edges sharp as blades, and above those cliffs steam coils upward from hidden fissures, ghostly threads against the grey sky. The earth here is alive, restless, its fire close to the surface. The crew watch in awe as patches of steam rise like spirits, drifting upward only to vanish in the cool air. Sigrid presses a hand to her chest. "It smells of stone and ash," she murmurs. "A land still being born." Thora, rocking her child, nods softly. Then perhaps it is a good place for new beginnings. Her voice holds both hope and caution, for everyone knows that a place still being born may also resist those who seek to settle it. Einar, ever the skald, cannot resist weaving a story into the moment. He clears his throat and begins. "It was Ingolfur Arnason who first came here, many winters past. Driven by storms, he cast his high-seat pillars into the sea, vowing to settle wherever they came ashore. He followed them to this place and built his farm, Reykjavik, where steam arose from the earth as if the land itself welcomed him with warmth. His words are carried on the wind, mingling with the scent of sulphur, giving the horizon a voice." Leif nods, confirming the tale. "The year was in the 800s, before most of us were born, when families left Norway to seek freedom. They found it here, in this harsh but honest land. No king's hand upon their shoulder, no chieftain's tax heavier than the sea, only the earth's fire and the sea's cold. His eyes soften as he gazes toward the black sands. They say that from exile and storm grew a settlement that endures still. The ship draws nearer, the details sharpening. You can see seabirds in their thousands, wheeling above the cliffs, their cries sharp as flutes. They dive into the surf, rising again with fish flashing silver in their beaks. The water near shore froths with life, a stark contrast to the silence of the doldrums left behind. The crew point, voices rising with excitement, the fatigue of long days forgotten. Even the goats stir more eagerly, sensing that the endless rocking sea has boundaries once more. Bjorn leans dramatically over the rail, sniffing the air. "I swear I smell stew already," he proclaims, which sends laughter along the deck. Einar shakes his head, muttering that Bjorn would smell stew on a glacier, but the humour only feeds the warmth of the moment. After so many days of stillness and storm, laughter feels like fresh bread, nourishing and necessary. The child in Thora's arms stirs and opens his eyes, blinking at the steam rising from the land. His tiny hand reaches upward, fingers flexing as though trying to catch the smoke. Thora kisses his brow and whispers, "The earth waves to you." Around her, the crew smile, softened by the tenderness, reminded that they are not only adventurers but carriers of lives yet to be shaped. As the coastline grows sharper, the crew prepare. Oars are shipped, ropes checked, the sail trimmed for approach. Yet even amid the bustle, their eyes keep drifting back to the strange beauty ahead. Black sands gleaming wet, cliffs streaked with layers of lava, steam rising from the earth like invisible prayers. It is not the soft green promise of farmland, but it is alive, commanding, undeniable. Einar, still caught in the grip of story, raises his voice once more. Out of exile came Ingolfur's home. Out of hardship came freedom. So too may we find new worlds, though they wear the mask of ash and fire. His words seem to stitch the moment to memory, ensuring it will not be forgotten. You may imagine yourself at the rail, the sharp smell of sulphur in your nose, the salt sting on your lips, the cries of seabirds above your head. You may feel the deck vibrating with the crew's eagerness, their bodies leaning unconsciously forward as if their weight alone could bring the land nearer. You may see the steam rising from fissures, a reminder that the earth itself is restless, alive, unpredictable. Yet in that unpredictability lies promise. The ship glides closer, carried by the long breath of the wind. The black sands gleam darker, the cries of the birds grow louder, the smell of sulphur stronger. For a moment it feels as though the earth and sea have conspired to remind you that the world is vast and strange, but also welcoming to those bold enough to cross its boundaries. If your eyes close here, let them. Imagine the coastline etched against the horizon, steam rising in pale ribbons, black sands glistening in the sun. Imagine the voices of seabirds folding into the rhythm of waves, the smell of earth's fire blending with the salt of the sea. Rest in the knowledge that discovery is not only for eyes but also for hearts, and that sometimes the first sign of land is not sight, but smell, carried softly on the wind. Even after the first sight of Iceland's black shores, the land continues to unfold in ways both unsettling and wondrous. As the ship rounds a rocky headland, the crew notice faint glows, trembling against the evening sky. Subtle at first, like distant torches, then brighter, unmistakable, flickering with a life that belongs not to human hands but to the earth itself. Smoke drifts upward in long grey ribbons, curling against the clouds, and the smell of sulphur sharpens until it feels as though the very air has been cooked over fire. Leaf steadies the tiller, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The land speaks here," he says simply. His words are neither praise nor warning, only recognition. The crew gather along the rail, gazing in awe as a ridge ahead reveals its secret. A volcano, its slopes dark and stern, breathes light into the sky, an orange-red glow bleeding from cracks that split the mountain like wounds. Steam hisses where hot stone meets hidden water, rising in plumes that twist into the wind. The sight is both beautiful and unnerving, a reminder that the earth beneath their feet is not passive soil but restless spirit. Einar is the first to break the silence with words. "Fire in the ground, ice on its shoulders," he murmurs, "a land made of opposites." He runs a hand through his damp hair, searching for a verse but finding only fragments. Sometimes even poets are silenced by scale. Sigrid hugs her cloak tighter, her eyes bright with reflection. "It is as though the world itself is weaving," she says, "thread of flame, thread of frost, drawn together into cloth too wide for us to measure." She glances at her half-finished weaving tucked into a bundle, then back at the glowing slopes, humbled by comparison. Bjorn, never comfortable with ore that stretches too long, throws out his arms dramatically. "At last a hearth big enough for my appetite. Someone fetch me a pot the size of this ship and we'll stew the ocean itself." The laughter that follows is grateful, shaking the crew loose from their stillness. Even Leif cracks a smile, though his eyes remain on the glowing mountain. As the ship drifts closer to shore, a new wonder appears. The hiss and bubble of hot springs spilling down rocky slopes into pools that steam against the cold air. The crew marvel, leaning forward to watch the water shimmer with heat. Thora, carrying her child, pauses near the bow and lifts the baby higher. The child's wide eyes catch the rising steam, fingers curling as though to grasp it. Thora whispers, "Look, little one, the earth warms itself for you." It is a tender moment, simple and quiet, but it lingers among the crew like a gentle fire, softening the strangeness of the land. The contrasts pile upon one another. Snow still clings to ridges high above, gleaming white even in the dimming light, while below, rivers of steam snake through mossy ground. The crew can hear the bubbling hiss, the gurgle of boiling water, the sharp crackle of stone adjusting under heat. It is like standing at the seam between two worlds, ice that preserves, fire that devours, yet here they exist together without contradiction. Einar finally finds his voice again, shaping a verse to carry the moment. Beneath the cold, a hidden flame, beneath the flame, a colder stone. The land does not choose between them, but wears both as its crown. His words hang in the sulphur-thick air, mingling with the hissing of the springs. The crew nod quietly, their awe tempered by reflection. They know this land will not be easy, but they also know it holds a power unlike any they have seen before. The smell of sulphur deepens as the wind shifts, and Bjorn coughs theatrically, clutching his throat. The gods boil their stew and forget the salt, he complains, drawing laughter that relieves the heaviness. Someone tosses him a strip of dried fish, and he pretends to hold it over an invisible pot, announcing, "There! Dinner prepared without firewood. At last, a blessing." The ship does not beach here, for the shore is too rocky, the cliffs too steep. Instead, the crew linger offshore, letting the wind carry them past while their eyes feast on the spectacle. They whisper among themselves, speaking of what it would mean to live in a land where warmth seeps from the ground, where water hisses with hidden flame, where even the air tastes of stone. Some shiver, some smile, some fall silent. Each carries their own thought, their own judgment of the place. Night folds deeper around them, but the volcano's glow refuses to fade. It burns steadily, painting the clouds orange, casting the sea in strange reflections. The waves glitter red, as though blood has been spilled across the water, but the ship glides unharmed, rocked gently by the swell. The contrast is striking, the fierce roar of the mountain muted by the calm sway of the sea. You may imagine yourself standing among them, the deck cool beneath your feet, the air heavy with sulphur, the sight of flame and snow side by side filling your vision. You can feel the warmth of the glow even at a distance, your skin tingling with its presence. You can hear the bubbling hiss, the strange voice of the land, half invitation, half warning. And you may find comfort in the child's soft wonder, in the crew's laughter, in the knowledge that awe can be shared, even when fear lurks within it. If your eyes close now, they will close not in dread, but in amazement. The glow of the volcano will remain behind your eyelids, steady and warm, while the sea continues to cradle the ship beneath you. Fire and ice will keep their vigil together, and you may rest in their strange companionship until dawn comes again. The sea has carried them further west, and now a new horizon begins to rise. At first it seems like nothing more than a pallid brightness, a glare upon the edge of the world that refuses to soften into cloud. But as the ship glides closer, the brightness hardens, sharpens, fractures. It becomes walls of white, glittering towers, slow-moving giants that breathe cold into the air. Greenland announces itself not with gentle shores but with ice. Ice vast enough to remake the sky itself. The crew gather at the rail, their breath fogging in the sudden chill. The air is sharper here, cleaner yet harsher, biting at the nose and stinging the lungs. A smell of salt mingled with something metallic lingers, like snow scraped across iron. The sea itself grows darker beneath the pale light, a strange green-blue, as though it holds the memory of glaciers within its depths. Ahead the icebergs rise. Some are jagged, sharp as teeth, others smooth as temples, their sides streaked with lines of blue that glow eerily in the dim sun. They crack and groan as they drift, the sounds deep and resonant like drums being struck beneath the surface. Every so often a slab breaks free with a sound like thunder, crashing into the sea, sending up a spray that glitters like shattered glass before it falls back with a hiss. Bjorn, shivering in his cloak, tries to summon humour. Even the rocks here have grown white with fright, he says, though his grin trembles with the cold. Someone answers that the rocks have simply frozen solid from hearing his jokes. The laughter is thin but welcome, rising in little bursts like sparks against the looming silence of the ice. Leif stands tall at the tiller, his gaze unwavering. His voice carries above the creaks of the ship. This is the place Erik the Red named Greenland. Do not be fooled by the name. He called it green so that men would follow, so that families would dream of pastures, but he knew as well as we do now, ice is the first to greet you. He lets the words settle. There is no bitterness in his tone, only a steady recognition. Einar steps forward, pulling his cloak tighter, and adds with the rhythm of verse. White walls rise, green name deceives, yet even here hope found a home. The words echo in the minds of the crew as they watch the ice shift and grind. They understand, perhaps more deeply now, what it means to carve lives from places that resist them, to build farms on land that bites, to herd animals beneath skies that offer more snow than rain, to endure not because the world is soft, but because people are stubborn enough to meet it. The soundscape becomes overwhelming. The ship groans as it threads carefully through the ice floes. Each bump reverberates through the planks. The creak of timber is joined by the grinding whisper of ice against hull, a sound that raises hairs and stiffens spines. Above it all, the echoes of distant cracking roll across the water, hollow and booming, as though the world itself were splintering. Sigrid holds her weaving close, though she does not work now. Her hands are too chilled, her eyes too fixed on the spectacle. Thora pulls her child beneath her cloak, warming him with her body, whispering softly that the white giants cannot harm him. The baby gurgles in half dream, unaware of the vastness rising around them. Even in this harsh welcome, tenderness remains, quiet and steady as a hearth unseen. Bjorn, desperate to shake off the tension, points at a particularly massive iceberg shaped like a throne. There sits the king of this land, he proclaims, a king made of ice, silent and merciless. If he will not grant us pasture, perhaps he will at least grant us a cold drink. The men laugh, though nervously, their eyes darting back to the towering white shapes that dwarf them. Humour is their rope against fear, thin but strong enough to hold. Leif calls for silence as the ship manoeuvres closer to a narrow passage between two icebergs. The air there feels colder still, shadows stretching high on either side, the water narrowing into a corridor of glassy green. The crew hold their breath, listening to the timbers groan, the ropes creak, the faint scrape of ice against the hull. Every sound is magnified, every moment stretched. Then, at last, the ship slides free into open water once more. A collective sigh rises, steaming in the cold air, a release of tension held too long. The horizon beyond is clearer now, revealing not endless ice, but stretches of rock and tundra, muted colours hidden beneath lingering snow. It is a land both forbidding and promising, a paradox that explains Erik's naming. To call it Greenland is not a lie, but a dream, painted in hopeful colours over a canvas of white. The crew gaze at it, each wondering whether such a place can truly hold homes, farms, families. You may imagine yourself standing among them, the cold biting at your cheeks, your breath puffing into the sharp air. You can hear the deep cracks of ice, the grinding chorus of floes, the echo of thunder when a slab breaks free. You can see the strange blue lines glowing within the ice, luminous veins running through frozen mountains. It is eerie, breathtaking, almost otherworldly. And in that strangeness lies wonder as much as fear. If your eyes close here, they may fill with visions of white towers and green promises. The sound of cracking ice may linger like a drumbeat, but the ship is steady, its crew together, its course sure. Rest in the knowledge that even in harsh welcomes hope finds room to breathe, and that beyond the ice waits the stubborn dream of land named for its colour, even when hidden beneath snow. The sea slowly releases its grip as the ship edges into calmer water, where the coast of Greenland shows not only cliffs and ice, but also stretches of low land softened by moss and scrub. The air still carries a bite, sharp and cold, yet it smells of earth now as much as salt. The sight of soil, however sparse, draws murmurs from the crew. After weeks of shifting decks and endless horizons, even the bleakest land is a balm to the eyes. They anchor in a sheltered cove where black rocks rise like watchful guardians, and from there they make their first steps onto Greenland's stony ground. The crew spread out cautiously, boots crunching over frost-tipped moss, eyes wide as though expecting the land itself to resist them. But the earth remains still, and the air, though cold, does not cut deeper than they can bear. It feels almost like permission. Not far inland, they find signs that others have been here before. Turf walls, low and sturdy, rise from the ground, built not with cut stone but with living earth stacked in blocks. The walls are thick, their tops sprouting with grass, blending into the landscape as though they were grown rather than built. Smoke stains linger faintly on stones set for a hearth, and though the fire is long gone, the place speaks of families who once made their lives here. Shelter carved from soil itself. Sigrid runs her hand over one of the turf walls, tracing the damp green threads of grass. It is like weaving, she says softly, earth and root instead of wool and thread. A home that grows from the ground as a cloak grows from the loom. Her voice carries reverence, and for a moment even Bjorn is quiet, letting the image settle. Inside, the turf house is dim but warmer than the open air. Light filters through a smoke hole, catching the edges of benches built into the walls. A faint smell of ash lingers, mingled with the musty scent of earth. Thora rocks her child in the doorway, whispering that here at least the wind cannot touch him. Her voice is almost lost in the thick silence, yet it feels like a blessing given to the house itself. Later, on the shore, the men turn their attention to the hunt. Seals bask on the rocks, their sleek bodies sprawled in indifference. They lift their heads lazily as the crew approach, their large eyes black and glossy, reflecting both curiosity and mild annoyance. The hunt is swift, necessary rather than cruel. A few seals are taken, their bodies carried back with respect, for every man knows that meat, hide and fat will mean survival. The cries of the seals echo strangely across the water, rough barks that sound almost like human laughter, as though the animals themselves are mocking the hunters even as they fall. Bjorn cannot help himself. He wipes sweat from his brow despite the chill and mutters, "They laugh because they know they taste better than our fish." The jest brings laughter that softens the hard work of dragging the heavy bodies up the beach. Even in this harsh land, humour remains a shield, keeping the crew's spirits from sinking into the weight of necessity. By evening, fires are coaxed to life in shallow pits ringed with stone. Seal meat roasts slowly, the fat dripping and hissing in the flames, sending up a smell both pungent and rich. Smoke curls into the cold air, winding into the rafters of memory, for every man and woman aboard has dreamed of warm food that does not taste of salt and dryness. The smell alone makes stomachs growl, and when the first strips are passed around, the crew chew with reverence, sighing with pleasure at the simple act of eating something hot, something fresh. Inside the turf house, the air fills with the mingled scents of roasting meat and damp earth. The walls, thick with living sod, hold in the warmth, and though shadows stretch across the dim interior, the glow of fire paints faces with a gentler light. The baby nestles against Thora's chest, drowsy from the heat and the rhythm of her heartbeat. Sigrid sets aside her weaving for the night and leans back, eyes closed, savouring the rare comfort of stillness without sway. Einar sits near the fire, drawing words slowly from the silence. "The earth itself has sheltered us tonight," he says, his voice steady and low. "We do not carve it as we do wood, nor shape it as we do cloth. We borrow its body and live within it, as children do within their mother's arms." His words settle over the group like another blanket, warming more than the body. Leif listens quietly, his gaze on the flames. When he finally speaks, it is not in poetry, but in fact. These turf houses will stand longer than many ships. Stone can crack, timber can rot, but earth, when built upon itself, holds. Families here will trade walrus ivory, hunt seals, drive sheep across rough pasture. They will live not because the land is kind, but because it is possible. His voice holds no boast, only certainty, and the crew take strength from it. The meal stretches unhurried, the firelight flickering across tired faces. Even Bjorn is subdued after his earlier joke, though when a glob of seal fat spits from the fire and lands on his boot, he leaps up with a roar, hopping about and shouting, "The meat seeks revenge!" Laughter bursts out again, rolling through the turf walls louder than the crackle of flames. The tension of survival loosens into the warmth of companionship, and for a little while the crew are not voyagers or settlers, but simply people sharing food. As the night deepens, the fire dies to glowing embers. Shadows stretch long across the low roof, and the crew settle into their cloaks, huddled together on the benches. Outside, the wind prowls, cold and sharp, but the turf walls hold, and the little house breathes warmth into its guests. The goats bleat softly from their pen, the calf lies down contentedly, and even the chickens roost without fuss. It is a fragile peace, but it is enough. You may imagine yourself seated among them, the rough wool of your cloak scratchy but warm against your skin, the smell of smoke and stew heavy in the air, the crackle of fire settling into quiet sighs. You can taste the richness of meat on your tongue, feel the solidity of earth beneath your feet after so long at sea, hear the murmur of voices blending with the wind outside. It is a simple moment, but one that roots itself deeply into memory. If your eyes close here, they close with the glow of embers still warm against your face, with the murmur of companions around you, with the weight of turf walls pressing their quiet strength into your bones. Let yourself rest as the crew rest, sheltered at last not only by wood and sail, but by earth itself. Morning breaks pale and thin, the light of the northern sun never fierce but insistent, slipping through grey clouds to rest on land that is both stern and gentle. The sea lies behind for now, the ship resting in its cove, while the crew wander inland to see what other settlers have raised in this cold, demanding place. What they find is not only turf walls and seal meat, but something quieter, something that speaks of faith carried across oceans. On a low rise, a small chapel stands. Its walls are not stone cut with chisels, but turf blocks stacked neatly, grass sprouting from their seams, so that the building looks half-grown from the earth itself. The roof is timbered, steep and dark, its boards rough but sturdy. At the peak sits a simple wooden cross, weathered by salt wind, yet upright still. The air smells faintly of smoke, moss and old wood, humble scents that blend together into something comforting. Sigrid lingers at the doorway, her hand brushing the rough frame. "It is like stepping into a prayer," she murmurs. Inside, the chapel is dim, light entering through a small opening above the altar. The altar itself is no more than a stone slab draped with cloth, but it carries the weight of miles of ocean crossed to place it here. A single lamp flickers, its oil flame steady despite the draught, filling the space with a glow soft enough to blur every shadow. Thora kneels for a moment, the child cradled against her shoulder, and whispers words too quiet for others to hear. Whether it is thanks for safe passage, or a plea for gentler days, or simply a lullaby spoken as prayer, no one asks. The sound of her voice lingers in the rafters like smoke. Even Bjorn, usually incapable of silence, stands hushed, his head bowed more in respect than belief, though afterward he mutters that he was only resting his neck. Einar, ever the skald, looks around the turf chapel with reverence. "Faith," he says, "is the one thing that travels lighter than bread. A man can carry it across the sea, and it weighs nothing, yet it builds walls stronger than oak." His words echo in the quiet space, more fitting than boast or jest. Leif nods, his voice steady. Here they will pray for harvest, for children to grow, for winters to be survived. The walls are humble, but the hope inside them is large. He touches the wood of the doorway as though sealing his words into it. Beyond the chapel, the land shows other signs of quiet life. A small farmstead lies sheltered in a shallow valley, its turf houses clustered like siblings, their grass-topped walls blending into the hillside. Sheep graze on the sparse pasture, their wool thick and grey, their bleats carrying faintly on the wind. Smoke rises from one of the houses, curling thin and white against the pale sky. The smell of peat fire drifts across the valley, earthy and sharp, mingling with the salt carried from the sea. The crew watch in thoughtful silence. For some, this is a glimpse of what might be. Families settled, animals grazing, smoke curling from warm hearths. For others, it is simply a curiosity, a reminder that not every voyage ends in sails and salt. Some voyages end in roots. Sigrid smiles faintly, her hands clasped. I can almost hear the sound of prayers carried on the wind, she says. Not loud, not commanding, but steady, like weaving threads into cloth that will outlast storms. Bjorn, breaking the silence with gentleness rather than noise, adds, "And if the gods are kind, perhaps even better bread." His words spark laughter, light and grateful, the sound of relief after solemnity. Einar shapes a verse as they stand, the wind tugging at his cloak. Wooden cross on turf-built wall, smoke of hearth and lamb's low call. Prayers are seeds the wind will sow, and faith will grow where rivers flow. The words drift outward, carried by the very wind he invoked, weaving themselves into the sounds of bleating sheep and distant waves. Leif gazes at the farmstead and the chapel, his eyes reflecting both steadiness and longing. "This is what we sail for," he says quietly. "Not only shores and stones, but a place where voices carry beyond the sea. You may imagine yourself standing on that rise, the cold air brushing your face, the smell of peat smoke curling around you. The chapel behind you breathes softly, its lamp flickering. Ahead, sheep graze in muted grass, their wool heavy with promise of warmth. Voices rise and fall around you, some in laughter, some in prayer, some in silence, but all softened by the land's calm insistence. The present folds into the past here. You may picture how the same chapel, now long vanished into ruin, once stood firm against the wind. Perhaps stones still remain today, moss creeping over them, whispering of hands that built and voices that prayed. The ruins would look quiet to modern eyes, but if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the murmur of old prayers still woven into the wind. If sleep finds you here, it will be like stepping into that chapel. Walls made not of grandeur but of earth, a roof above, a light flickering steady, a prayer carried across centuries. Let your eyes soften, your breath steady, and your thoughts rest in the knowledge that faith once stood on this edge of the world, and that its quiet strength endures still. Evening gathers slowly in Greenland, the light reluctant to leave the horizon yet stretched thin until it seems more memory than day. The sea beyond the cove sighs against the rocks in a long steady rhythm, as though exhaling from the effort of carrying the ship so far. The air is crisp, touched with the scent of salt and peat, and as darkness deepens, lanterns are lit along the deck and within the turf houses. Their glow small but steady, a constellation close at hand. The crew move more, quietly now, their voices softened not only by weariness, but also by the awareness that their long crossing has brought them here, to the edge of the known world. Every action feels gentler, unhurried. Cloaks are hung to dry, boots are set carefully near the fire pits. Animals are fed with quiet efficiency. There is no need for haste, no need for shouting. The ship, like its crew, seems to settle into rest, its timbers creaking contentedly in the evening air. Thora rocks her child near the glow of a lantern, her song little more than a hum. The baby stirs and sighs, then drifts back into sleep, his face bathed in golden light. Sigrid resumes her weaving, the soft scrape of the shuttle soothing as a heartbeat. Bjorn, usually restless, leans against the wall, hands folded across his chest, a faint smile on his face as though even his jokes have finally given way to contentment. Einar sits on the bench, his knife idle in his lap. He does not reach for words now, for sometimes silence itself is the finest poem. He listens instead, to the low murmur of wind across grass, to the faint crackle of a peat fire, to the steady breathing of those around him. Leif, at the threshold, keeps watch as always, though his shoulders are less tense. His eyes roam across the horizon where the last line of light lingers, then he turns back to the lanterns glowing warmly at his side. The world outside feels vast, cold and unforgiving, but within the glow of the settlement and the ship there is warmth, there is presence, there is peace. The harshness of icebergs, the fury of storms, the silence of doldrums, all are softened by this moment of stillness. It is not triumph that the crew feel, but rather belonging. The sense that even on the farthest shore, even at the edge of maps, people can carve out a corner of light against the dark. Einar finally speaks, not in verse but in plain words. "This is what remains," he says softly. "Not the storms we endured or the miles we counted, but the fire we keep alight when darkness comes." His voice fades into the hush, a truth too simple to need embellishment. Bjorn chuckles, not to break the mood, but to anchor it. "And if tomorrow the sea calls us again, at least we rest tonight with full bellies and warm hands. I'll take that over any saga." The laughter that follows is gentle, not loud, more like a sigh shared between friends. The lanterns glow on, their light steady. Shadows play against turf walls and polished timbers, softening edges, blurring the line between dream and waking. The sea continues to sigh, the wind continues to whisper, and above, stars begin to prick through the fading light, each one a reminder of the paths that guided them here. You may imagine yourself lying down in this place, the smell of peat smoke curling faintly in the air, the lantern light painting your eyelids gold. The ship rocks gently in the cove, its motion no longer endless but restful, like a cradle set down at last. The murmur of voices fades, replaced by the sound of breathing, steady and calm. Around you, the world may still be vast and wild, but here, at this edge, it feels safe enough to sleep. If your eyes close now, let them. Let the lanterns glow behind them, steady and kind. Let the sea's sigh match your breath, rising and falling in rhythm. Let the ship rock you as though you were part of its story, carried not through storm, but into rest. The voyage does not end, but for tonight it pauses, and that pause is enough.